because if anybody knows, and this is repetitive, but since we got 4 minutes till it's actually started, I don't mind repeating it. But one of the things that I noticed when I really got into the triune was the seemingly evolutionary movement. How when I first learned about whatever this is called, spirituality, let's call it, the term is oneness. So all the books were talking about oneness. So if you were reading books in the 70s or 80s, the term, at least for me, the word was oneness. Non-dual was not a word that was in my lexicon. There was no internet. And the bookstores that I went to certainly didn't have access to any of these deep books, nor my libraries. So for me, if, the closest you could get to this, which by the way, for me, just started with meditation. The first books I got, what was available to me was just meditation books. And the focus word was always oneness. So that was like the first word. And then, I guess in the 90s, once the internet came and, you started to find more specialized bookstores, then I started to notice the word non-dual start to come in. So I noticed it went from oneness to non-dual. And then many years later, after I got obsessed with the triune, I was like, wow. So there's the evolutionary evolvement of these teachings, these perennial teachings that have been here forever. They seem to, like I said, take on a collective life of their own. So collectively, we refer to these as oneness. And then throughout times, it gets more nuanced, where the understanding of the oneness gets so nuanced that we come up with really not one and not two. And then what I was thinking was, I think the triune is the next level of evolvement, that we're going to understand the relationship between the one and the many. The how does the one manifest as the many? So getting back,
it's always been there too, though, Mark.
What's that?
The triune.
Yes,
it's always been there.
Yes, I don't see a voice. Who am I speaking
to? Rod.
Rod. I'm sorry, Rod. Yes, absolutely.
It's always been there.
Absolutely, it's been there deeper than anything. But when I try to look for it, I couldn't really find much of it. And the people that did know about it were talking about it. It was buried in mystery.
Yeah, it's got that Eastern mysticism, poetic, philosophical stuff that the Western mind doesn't do very well with.
Absolutely.
Because Sit, Chat, Ananda is your model.
Yes.
Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, like you have in the book. It's all in there. It's just, it's not very laid out like you did. I think I told you in the email, you lay it out very pragmatically, very Western,
Yeah. And like I said, but you were more knowledgeable in this. We've emailed to each other. So I know you are like Guna, you're just extremely knowledgeable in this area, but most people aren't. I think you'd give us that most people, especially when I was growing up in the like 80s. But you're right. It was always there. I certainly didn't know about the Sat Chit Ananda or all the other examples you gave, but it was there in Christianity. Father, Son, the Holy Ghost. So we did see it there.
But they messed it up. They messed it up as Father, Son, Holy Ghost. It actually should be, according to your model, Father, Holy Ghost, Son.
Oh, wow. I thought that too.
That's how I understand it too. One question I have for you, Mark, since you came from almost New Age and then had it as you developed spiritually by coincidence, but maybe not, then you became exposed to other teachings. And now, after quite a number of years and a lot of reading in the meantime, you're suddenly tuning in on this triune thing. Do you think that that's because of your own spiritual evolution, that these things are making sense to you, and also that you didn't quite experience them before necessarily, but now you are? Because if I made that question clear.
I think, and you tell me if you made the question clear by my answer. I think that number one, I'm thinking maybe it was helpful that I never knew about the triune based on your question, because I didn't have any preconceived notions of it. But The reason it was important to me was because, and just for me, and that's one thing I want to emphasize too, is I think it is the most amazing thing in the world to try, and the most amazing discovery, the littlest known secret ever known. And like Rod said, it's been there forever. It's the most hidden secret forever. But I don't want anybody to confuse my excitement and my enthusiasm to think that it's intrinsically necessary for anybody. I think it's there, but I think it's a model. It's a tool. It's almost a symbol for to help us see something that's normally unseeable under normal circumstances. So, and the reason I say that is because for me, I really did think it was necessary. I really, really struggled with, I was living in my head. I was really struggling with living with the concept that this is all one, that this is it. So it was concept, but I was struggled with it because I knew it. And I did have experiences, many experiences, but any experience has a beginning and it has an end. I didn't have anything that was, coming from my heart, coming from an actual ongoing experience, a deeper experience, let's say. And so I lived in that struggle. I struggled with the concept of, I do believe with all my heart, knowing that everything that I'm seeing is me, or whatever word you're looking at, or this is it, that I'm looking at my daughter and she's me and we're not two. I feel all those things to the bottom of my bone, but I just don't. It was impossible. I was really just stuck on the hey, William, nice to see you. Glad you're here, William. But for me, it was an impossible thing, and I struggled with it. I was in my head struggling constantly. Every time I saw people, I don't have privy to their thoughts. I don't know their experience, but yet we're all the same. And like I said, I've had experiences where I could see that, but I really struggled with it. So for me, since I struggled with it, I zoned in on it. That's the way, that's been my, I'm sorry.
Do you mean struggled in accepting it because you were seeing and experiencing one thing, but in your head you were telling yourself something different, and they weren't compatible yet? Is that what you're saying?
100%. I knew it. And like I said, it's not like I just read it and then that was it. I was taking it for people's words. I have, at this point spent all of my life dedicated to meditation and, all the stuff you've read in my book. But still, I was in my head of how could I be, well, I'll just take you to the moment that I described in my book of the actual enlightenment experience. Right prior to it, I'm sitting with my daughter on my lap saying, I know that she's me, but I just don't see how it could be her, and I'm not privy to her thoughts. Like, how could this be? Like, how? I was stuck on the how. That's
okay, well, wait a second right there. Why was it important to you that you didn't know her thoughts, and do you know her thoughts now?
No, I do not. And I do know that, but I want to get back to your first question of why did I think it was important?
Yeah.
Which is why I said, I don't think it's important for anybody else. The reason that you ask, why do I think that was important? That's the very same reason I want to say this is not universally important. It was important for me. It was a thought. I was hung up on the thought. So I struggled with that. And that for me was the last thing, was I struggled with the thought of how could this be?
And then you just let it go? Is that how you resolved that?
Let me think back. Honestly, I haven't thought about that. Let me actually think about it.
Because I haven't heard other people express, I mean, you were still in duality, obviously. You had taken major steps toward non-duality, but you were aware with your daughter sitting on your lap, although she's you, she's not entirely you because you don't know what she's thinking. And I haven't heard anybody else explain that what sounds like among the last steps that way.
And like I said, for me, I guess you could say it was a holding on to. It was a holding on of a concept. I guess you could say. Like I said, I don't think that last thing for me of understanding the how is necessary for everybody, but it was my last thing. I think everybody's got their own last unique thing that they're telling themselves that they're waiting for something. And for me, it was the how. I was really lost in concepts. But I just want to say one thing before we go on. So I just noticed it's 1. And Peter had a really good suggestion at the top. So because we never really officially started this. So we'll kind of officially start
What
it.
happened to him?
So anyway, so this will be the official start. My name's Mark. Nice to meet you guys. Nice to see everybody here. I hope I said everybody as you came in. Nubin, Anna Marie, I didn't get a chance to say hi to you, but hi. And Holly, hi Holly. I'm so glad you came. And I see iPad, so we'll see who that is later. So I think and Diane, I just noticed you're here, and Nubin, so thank you guys. But anyway, yeah, so I think, by the way, so this talk that we're going to do today is on the Dzogchen teachings. The way I want to do this, I want to do this bi-weekly. So twice a month, I want to do this, and we're talking about Dzogchen. And then once a month, I'll do another one, and we'll talk about my book, whichever book. This book will be on the Triune. So that way, whoever just wants to focus on the Dzogchen could come to the bi-weekly ones. And then whoever's interested in the book will be just once a month. So this one's going to be on Dzogchen. So yeah, let's get into the Dzogchen, and then we could come back after we're done. Once we, oh, and that's the other thing too. Peter said I should lay out some rules or you know, expectations about what this will look like. So the way I think it would be most productive is I'll start off saying something, and then open it up to questions and answers as I go on, because I do have a tendency to go on too long and forget about the time, and next thing you know, an hour's gone by. So, oh, and also feel free to wave your hand too, though. Yeah, if you have something that you think would be helpful, it'll probably be helpful to other people than you. So don't hesitate to, you know, put that hand signal up. I don't know how to do it myself, but wave if you have a question. Like I said, if you're curious about something, probably somebody else will be too. And I may not notice for a while because I get, you know, into what I'm talking about, but I will keep an eye on it. So yeah, let's just go ahead and start. Let me take a little sip of water.
Anybody that wants to raise their hand, it's in the reactions menu. Mark. Oh,
thank you. Yeah, everybody hear that? It's in the reactions. Everybody, yeah. Rod just gave you.
I'll just do it for fun. It's just down in reactions, yes. And then my hands should pop up.
Good deal. Yes, and thank you, Peter. All right. Hey, and nice to see you, Minette. I'm so glad you came. Awesome. Glad to see you. So glad you came. Yeah, and by the way, a lot of the people here are coming from Asia and Australia, so I really appreciate you guys. And Minette made me think about that. I know Minette's from Asia, so I really appreciate you guys, especially. I know this is a weird time of the day, but we'll make it worth it. I promise. I'm super excited about this, by the way. I've never been excited about anything as this. And I'll tell you why, but before I do that, the first thing I want to talk about is why the Dzogchen teachings in particular that I want to talk about. I'm sure if anybody's talked to me, you know, I credit everything to the Dzogchen teachings and Zen, but most of the time Dzogchen. And the thing I didn't even realize until I just went back and looked at all this, I collectively probably only read less than 100 pages of really pertinent Zen and Dzogchen if you put them all together, because it's really dense material. It's not like normal reading. It's the type of thing where you read a paragraph or a sentence and you just have to put it down because it's literally pointing. It's literally bringing you into a space similar to, you know, a drug or hypnotism or any other type of thing, something that entrains your mind. And that's why I want to, in between the reading, impress upon you what it meant to me, because a lot of this stuff is really ephemeral. It's really just wispy. All the language in the sentences are very wispy. So I want to focus on what it meant to me, since, like I said, everything that I wrote in all three books, I 100% credit to Dzogchen. So the reason I, again, bring this up is because I feel like these teachings are very, and I hesitate to say special, but they're very highly focused on something in particular. And I didn't even realize that until actually just now when I was reflecting back on all the non-dual teachings. So everybody knows all the non-dual teachings have the same heart. They're all pointing to the same thing, whether it be Taoism or even Christian mysticism or, Zen, Dzogchen, Advaita, anything. But they all have different flavors. They all have different cultures. They all have different languages, and that attract us in different ways. And the reason that I was attracted most to Dzogchen was just because, again, the language that was spoken in. For me, the reason that Dzogchen appealed to me and Zen was because they didn't speak to you as if they're trying to take you from this place to someplace else, or they weren't trying to add something else to you. Whenever you read the language of most teachings, it sounds like that, like we're going to try to get you from here to there, or we're going to try to bring something extra to you, something new to you. Whereas when you read Dzogchen, they don't use that. The language is always based on continuing or abiding, maintaining or cultivating, but never a language that insinuates that something new is going to be brought in, or you're going to be someplace else than whatever is right here. So the second aspect is the emphasis. So like I said, all these teachings, the non-dual teachings, are all the same at the heart, but there's infinite teachings. Even within Buddhism, there's infinite teachings. Anybody knows more about that than I do. I know the least about Buddhism or any of these things as a whole. I've always had a magnet that's always drawn me into something very super specific, which is, what we generally call non-duality. But anyway, so with all the non-dual teachings, we're basically looking at the totality. That's the one thing that they all have in common. We're looking at everything as a totality. But even when we're looking at everything as a totality, there's different emphases that attract us to studying the totality. Some people's emphasis could just be the reason that you're into this, the reason you're studying non-duality is maybe your emphasis is just on truth, just bare naked truth. You're just truth seeking or wisdom. So that's your emphasis. Somebody else, they could be, their motivation, their attraction, their magnet could be towards the oneness or the unification. That could be the aspect of the totality that they're interested in the most. What's another one? Or the self-aware aspect. The what am I aspect is, looking for the core of drilling down to what am I? It could be that aspect of the totality. What's another one? Or the origination aspect. And that for me was the thing for me was the origination aspect. You could just really have a magnet towards where the hell is this coming from? What is this? Where is this originating from? So that could be your emphasis. Or your emphasis could be just on the suffering of life, the compassion of life, these things. But my point is, we're all looking at the totality. But the emphasis that Dzogchen has, that I just realized just now as I'm reflecting on this, is their emphasis is not on any of those things. Instead, its emphasis is on the very ground. Its emphasis is on the very foundation, the very, the root, the original root. So that's the, that is the attraction. I didn't realize this, by the way, when I was writing my books, but that was my attraction to developing this symbol, the symbol that you guys know by now. So my whole attraction to that thing was because that's the ground. That is the foundation. So now that I've looked at that and I've seen that that's what it is, I've realized the importances of why I and you guys are so attracted to the root or the foundation or the ground. And the reason is because that is the part of ourselves that we have to cultivate. That's the part of ourselves that we have to emphasize to see things as they are. The only reason that we refer to the word as illusion or anything like that is because you're not seeing it as it is. But if you're seeing it as it is, the world is not illusion. So the way you see that is you cultivate that aspect of yourself. That's the foundation. That's the root. That's the ground of our being. So that's the attraction. So that's the thing that we're attracted to. And the more that you cultivate that, the more that you see that, the more that you're are aware of that, the more you're going to see that when you see what's up here in the world, when you look in the world. So the more you get to know the foundation of yourself. And that's why, by the way, that's why we're so attracted to things like meditation and stillness and silence. All these things are practices to cultivate the empty aspect of ourselves. Because in reality, the world that we're looking at, that's emptiness too, but it appears as form. So we have the ability to draw our attention to the emptiness, to the foundation. So that way we could recognize the emptiness when we look at it in the world. I liken it to space. The way I experience it is space. So that's why I'm always promoting backing up, because when you back up, you're seeing yourself as space. You're experiencing yourself as space. And by recognizing the space when you back up, recognizing yourself as the encompassing space, that the more you do that, that makes you able to see it then when you look in the world. Then when you look straight in front of you, you see that you're actually looking at space because you recognize it. You recognize what's already there because you paid attention to the emphasis, to that contrast. So anyway, yes. So, but anyway, my whole point of saying that is because there's three emphases. One is that if you practice getting to know the emptiness, if you back up and getting to know the emptiness, two, you're going to see how we mistakenly project one quality onto the other. In other words, when you see that you're clear space, that you're emptiness, that you're impermanent, you'll see that when you look at the world, all the mistakes that we are making is because if you're projecting your impermanence on the world, everything in the world, it has a beginning and it has an end. But if you look at it as if it is something real, as if it is something permanent as you are, then, you know, that's what brings upon suffering, because you're projecting your impermanence, your unchangingness onto the form. And then same likewise, when you're looking at the form, everything else out there has a beginning and it has an end. Back here where you are, that has no beginning, that has no end. But again, if you project the qualities of the form in front of you, then you're going to project that back here and think that you have that you're vulnerable, that you're touchable, that you have a beginning, that you have an end. And then the third aspect of doing that, when you're backing up and seeing that you're the emptiness, not only are you seeing that you're the space, but also the encompassing aspect. That's what brings you into your the nature of your experiences, which is to be encompassing. Everything that you see is what you're encompassing. So by backing up and noticing that emptiness quality, that bottom quality, that ground, that foundation, that's what's helping you recognize the encompassing aspect of yourself. And that's what the Dzogchen teachings are doing. They're bringing you to that spot to notice, to recognize more that you are what encompasses what you see. All right, so now we could actually begin. So by the way, does anybody have any questions about that before I switch actually into the Dzogchen stuff? Nope, good, okay. And the reason this came about, in case, I don't know if I've mentioned this, is my wife just said recently that she wanted to get real serious about this teaching. She was, you know, going through some things, and she was like, she really wanted to get serious. So I looked back on my life and I realized that the most important thing for me that really changed everything was one single book. It was called The Cycle of Day and Night. It's this book right here by Namkyu Norbu, Cycle of Day and Night. And that's the book, when I was reading this book, this is the book that I mentioned before when I was saying I couldn't read like 3 pages of it before I would just like feel overwhelming feeling to just kiss the book and thank it. And I remember thinking very specifically, like, this could be a religion itself. This book right here could just be everything, could be the complete teachings. So anyway, so I sat down and I started to read it to her. And as I was reading it to her, it just all started coming back, because I'm sure if anybody's heard me talk before, I haven't read anything in like 20 years since those books. Those books were the last books I read. And they did a good job. That's another thing that dawned on me. They did such a good job of non-attachment that even though they're the things that I hold in the most highest esteem, like I said, I'm not afraid to admit I find them special. I'm smitten with the teachings. I love the teachings. I forgot my point. I don't know. Darn it. But anyway.
When you suddenly became interested in reading again?
Yes, thank you. You read my mind. I don't know why you're in my head. That's exactly it. So
I happen to be telepathic, but I'm not enlightened.
You did it. That's exact. So it did that exactly. So they did the job of number one. Once I got what I needed, boom, I forgot about the books, never thought about the books. But like you said, when I came back to them, I was like, oh my God, I forgot, just how instrumental this was in my life. So now, like you said, now I just ordered a whole collection of all the Lojampa teachings. And by the way, also, hey, Guna, nice to see you. So glad you can make it. Yeah, I say this especially to Rod and Guna and people who are more knowledgeable than me. I'm gonna say names wrong. I'm horrible. As you know, I've never talked to people about this before. My whole life has been by myself, just reading books by myself. So I've never talked out loud. I've never said any of these words out loud. So I guarantee you, I'm saying every word wrong, every Buddhist word wrong. So if Rod or Guna or anybody else more knowledgeable than me, feel free, to correct me if I pronounce something wrong, which I will do, definitely. So
I'm a West Texas hick, dude. I have no idea how to pronounce those words, man.
Awesome. I'm sure you're better than me.
And right. Gunnar has a German accent in his Sanskrit.
Yeah, and that's you know what, I take it back. Don't even bother, because everybody's got different accents, and it probably won't even matter to anybody. But anyway, so yeah, so that's why I'm so excited, because I feel like everything's come full circle. And now Guna just missed this, but now I'm super excited about reading again. Now I'm like, oh, and to listen. By the way, I also want to send a link to everybody of a channel of somebody that's actually reading these teachings just in the purest form. She's reading them real slow, pausing in between, beautiful music. And I really highly recommend people go to that channel and listen to anything. It's all the highest teachings, not just the Dzogchen. I only stay in the Dzogchen folder, but if you look at Veda or Taoism or anything, it's got it all. But I'm just really smitten with the Dzogchen teaching. So anyway, we've gone this long and I haven't even started. So we're going to go ahead and start with it.
Before you start, could you tell me a quick synopsis of what I did miss?
Oh yeah, we missed introductions. You missed a party. No, I'm teasing. No, the only thing you missed was me setting it up by saying, oh, how all the teachings, there's so many different teachings, but there's a different emphasis in this. And I was explaining why, for me, of all the non-dual teachings specifically, I was drawn to Dzogchen, and I was talking about how everything speaks from a different language and different cultures. So even though all these teachings are the same, everything from Zen to Taoism, for me, the language of Dzogchen speaks to me so deeply. It's bordering on magical. And I said the reason why was because they speak to you in languages that aren't trying to bring you from point A to point B or bring in something new. They use words like continue and stuff like that. But anyway, that's basically all I went through. And this is going to be on YouTube, so you can go back and look at it. Also, I did kind of set up the rules that if you want to talk, if you want to ask any questions, just put up your hand. Somewhere there's a hand signal, and I'll try to notice it. But every once in a while, I'll stop anyway and try to stop myself to see if anybody has any questions. But so the first thing, getting into the Dzogchen teachings was, so after my wife reminded me of these Dzogchen teachings, I went back and looked at my books. And the last book that I started, but I never finished, was this huge thick book right here called The Golden Letters. And it's basically, it's the 3 points from Grab Dorje. And there's the first name I'm pronouncing wrong for you right there. But anyway, so I was looking at this, and this is an example of how ethereal or how slippery these teachings are to actually study. Because this book, The Golden Letters, you see how thick it is. It's that thick. but it's based on a teaching by Grub Dorje. It's only 3 sentences, 3 simple sentences. And the rest of this book is just commentary on those 3 sentences. So that's what I mean by it's super ephemeral and slippery. But when I read those, so anyway, I played a little game where I was going to try to guess what those 3 points were, you know, based on my experience with Dzogchen. And I didn't actually guess, but I would have been wrong, because if I did guess, my assumption, it would have been something on the base, the path, and the fruit. And if anybody knows the triune and my stuff, that's like the essence of everything, is everything has a base, the path, and the fruit. So I thought it was going to be that, but it wasn't. Instead, it was something far more interesting, far more telling about how these teachings are universal. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. When I was invited to that POK group, the group discussion I did, they asked me to come up with some practices, you know, some methods or something. And I couldn't remember any or think of any. So I went back and read through my first book to see if I could find any. And I didn't find any, but what I found in there was what I titled 3 foundations of practice. That it doesn't matter what you practice, it doesn't matter what method, but you have to have these 3 foundations you bring into any practice. And then the closest thing I could find to a practice was in my book. I talked about something called, that I noticed. It wasn't really a practice, it was something I noticed that was happening in life, where we go through 3 stages over and over and over again. It starts with an insight, and then from that insight will lead to a trust in reality. And then from that trust in reality, there will come a time where you can put that trust into action, and then that action is surrendering. From the fruit of that surrendering, it's going to lead to a deeper insight. So now that's why basically we're always having the same realizations over and over and over again. I'm sure all of you have had this experience where you're like, oh my God, I just got the secret to the universe, and you write it down, and it's the same thing you've said a million times, but somehow it's deeper. Somehow you're like, oh no, this time it's deeper, and you know it's deeper. So we keep going around the same thing. We just keep getting the same insight over and over again. And the insight could be, I am that, you know, whatever the insight is for you, it's the same insight over and over and over again. And then that insight leads to a deeper trust in reality. And then from that, like I said, reality will present an opportunity for you to surrender. That's all it's doing. It's all its job is to present you an opportunity. And then if you surrender, you're going to be rewarded with yet another deeper insight. So I noticed that was the, and I don't want to call it a method, but it was the practice, I guess. So anyway, so I noticed that when I looked at Rob Dorje's thing, his 3 foundations were exactly those 3 principles, but he says it much more deeply, obviously, and that's why the way he said it, somebody wrote a commentary with all these different pages. So to start this, I want to start off with reading just 3 sentences. It's 3 sentences of Grub Dorje, and that's all it is, by the way. That's the whole thing. The whole book was based on those 3 sentences, but that is the foundation for everything. These 3 sentences are also, by the way, they're identical. What I said were the 3 foundations, and I'll show you how they're the same.
What are the 3 sentences? What are they? Yeah, read them, please.
All right. The first sentence is, so it's the 3 statements that strike the essential points. The first one is introduced directly to one's own nature. So that would be the insight. The second one is one definitively decides upon this unique state. That's the trust. And then the third one is one continues directly with confidence in liberation. And that's the surrendering. So here's the thing is, I know what everybody's thinking when you're reading those 3 sentences. They sound like 3 redundant sentences. It sounds like nothing. It sounds like the guy didn't say anything. You're like, really? That's the whole thing?
No, just the opposite. For me, it's how do you do the first 2? Sure, those were easy. How do you do the third one? How did you do it? If you don't mind me, I'm interrupting, but
no, that's fine. Thank you. I appreciate it. But just do the hand thing next time. Put the wave thing. Oh, I appreciate that. That's the surrendering thing. And so for me, the way I saw it by myself, like I said, even before I did that, when I was looking for the 3 strongest things necessary for anything are, what did I say? The first one was just first seeing if that magnet of you being drawn towards self-introspection and knowing who you are is strong enough that that's what you really care about. That's the only thing that you care about. That's what I call the first foundation. And that's what he calls the first one, is recognizing your own nature. Then the second one, I said the foundation is you have to commit to it. Like once you recognize that, you have to commit, like, yes, this is what I want. This is my only way out. This is my only salvation. The world's going to offer me nothing but suffering and disappointment and you know, complete hell. The only thing out is this magnet that I'm attracted to. And that magnet is looking for yourself. That one thing that you trust, that shred of awareness, that shred of clarity. So for the way he said it, when I said you have to commit yourself, the way he said it better was one definitively decides upon this unique state. That's the operative word. So the first operative word would be recognizing your original state. The second one is deciding upon it. In other words, you've had such an epiphany, like this is it. I zoned in, I found out the thing that's going to help me. I saw your hand, Kirk. I saw the thing, I'm zeroed in, and that's what I want. And if that's true, if that's your base, if you really found out from your own self-introspection that this is the only direction I want, this is the only thing that's going to help me out, that's the only thing that's going to save me, then spontaneously and naturally will lead to the second thing, which Rob Dorje says is one definitively decides upon this unique state. In other words, you recognized it so deep that you decided upon it, and that's it. And that's what I called setting it a commitment, setting an agenda. And the way I described it to my wife is you make the decision from this day forward, every day when I wake up, I'm going to treat myself as if I was an Olympic athlete. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm counting every calorie. My mind's going to be up 24 hours a day. I'm watching all my activities because that's how much I care about it. I care about this more than anything. I'm putting all my eggs in this basket and I'm committed to it. And I'm decided to just the mind. And then you just practice the mind. You cultivate awareness. But the whole thing is you've made the commitment based on the recognition, which leads us to the fruit, which is one continues directly with confidence in liberation. How that manifested for me was when I talked about the third foundation was, so the first foundation is seeing if that's what you really want. And then the second one is committing to it. And then the third one is at that point, dropping all the teachings, being spontaneous and dropping everything, because that's what they mean by going forth confident. You don't need the teachings anymore. You don't need to check yourself anymore. You've seen directly that this is it. You've committed yourself to it, and you could go forth confidently that reality is going to present you with opportunities. You're going to see yourself, and the deeper that recognition, the more you're going to be able to see it for what it is. And that process will just keep repeating itself over and over again and gives you that confidence. That's why I said the insight leads to trust, which leads to surrendering, which leads to more confidence, which leads to a deeper insight. And so that deepening just like a snowball, one thing pushes the other. The trust pushes the surrender pushes the insight pushes the trust. And that thing, that direction that we're going in, if you're committed to it, it unwinds by itself. That's the only direction it could go in. So anyway,
okay,
I saw a couple
very well put, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so anyway, that was kind of a little, just a preset of this, just to say
Kirk
how.
had something.
Go ahead. Kirk, yes, Kirk.
I'm good, thanks.
You're good, all
Go
right.
ahead. Keep going, Mark.
Thank you, I appreciate that. All right. So anyways, the reason I bring that up is just how universal this is. How you could think anybody's going to, you could try to, by the way, I did try to invent this by myself. I don't know if anybody knows, if I told this story before, but I tried to push away Buddhism and all that and say, I want nothing. I want to go out and find this myself. I don't want any teachings. I don't want to have any words. I don't want to rely on anything. And I got it all out of my mind. But when I came back and wrote down my truths, it was just Buddhism. That's all it was. In my own words, but I looked, I was like, I didn't say anything new. I didn't come up with anything new. It's just the same thing. But I think that is important that you do that, come up with your own thing and do it yourself. And then, like I said, it just so happens to be when you do look to the teachings, you're going to recognize your experience in their words. And that's what I love so much about these. So anyway, without further ado, we'll actually go ahead and start off with the book, The Cycle of Day and Night by Namki Norbu. All right. Oh, this is exciting. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if anybody watched the first video where I talked about Dzogchen, but I did a little bit of an introduction to it. So if anybody hasn't, Dzogchen has a real ephemeral history. You know, like if you look at the history, supposedly didn't even come from this planet. It's on 13 other stars. It's got a whole, you know, weird history to it. So a lot of, and by the way, also, the way I'm going to read this to you is the way I read the books myself. The reason that these books were so powerful for me, sorry about that, is I skip through books. I breeze through books. I'm only interested in one thing. Like I said, I have a magnet. I have a magnet, and my magnet, first of all, it leads me to very few books. That's why I said I'm not well-read at all. I'm the opposite of well-read. But my magnet has always drawn me to the deepest books. I don't know what adjective you want to use, but the deepest books. And when I read these books, my magnet is still there to where I only read the deep parts. I skip past anything that looks like it's about memorizing. I skip past anything that looks like it's being about tradition. I look past anything that has to do with anything that's not a magnet, that's not taking me in there in that very moment. If you're not taking me, if I'm not arriving, if I'm not feeling it in that moment, I'm breezing past because I'm not interested in remembering concepts and rules and all this stuff. So that's the way I'm going to read this too. We're just going to go where the magnet takes us, just to the root bottom, the foundation. All right. So without further ado, the cycle of day and night, the essential Tibetan text of the practice of contemplation. And I don't know if they're going to say this, so I'll just say it. I may end up repeating myself, but this text did come from Grab Dorje. Oh, by the way, that's the other thing too, is I've never read anything by Grab Dorje or Longchenpa or Padma, I can't even pronounce his name, but any of the people, because I can't read them. Like I said, it's so slippery. I mean, maybe now I can, it's true. I do understand those 3 sentences I read now, but before I couldn't read it. It was so slippery, I just couldn't get it. I could only read Namkhin Urbu. So Namkhin Urbu takes, let's say, 3 sentences of one of these great masters, and he's going to blow up a whole book about them. So that's what all these Dzogchen books, they're very thin, and it's got, let's say, 1 page of the actual sutra, and then, you know, 30 pages of commentary on it. And that's the only thing I could read is the commentary by Namkhin Urbu. So that's what you're reading, or that's what I'm reading to you. All right. So in the Long Day series, the Dzogchen teachings are found, the instructions of Grab Dorje on how to practice contemplation both day and night. And see, that's the whole thing, is this is not a practice that you pick up and put down. This is a practice from the minute you recognize it, you commit it, and you're in it 24 hours a day. It's not a practice. It's a perspective. It's an experience. This present text is a synopsis of these practices. According to the Buddhist tradition of Tibet, Grab Dorje was the first human teacher of the Dzogchen system of contemplation practice. The Tibetan term Dzogchen has usually been translated as the great perfection. In Tibet, it represents the quintessence of the Buddhist teachings. And what they mean by that is, the story is, once the Dzogchen teachings were discovered, and I won't get into the history of that, but when they were discovered, it was the Nyingma lineage of the Buddhist teachings that adopted them as their highest teachings. So when they discovered the Dzogchen teachings, they're like, oh, cool, we'll take that and we'll assign them as what were called the culmination teachings. In other words, all the Buddhist teachings culminate in Dzogchen. All right, so Dzogchen pertains, and this is the most beautiful part. This is the paragraph that's really everything. It really puts out there that Dzogchen is not, at least the way I see it. And that's the other thing too, is these words are bigger than us. Buddhism is a bigger word than what we know. Dzogchen is a bigger word. For me, when I say Dzogchen, I'm not talking about a religion. I'm not talking about a lineage. I'm not talking about a practice. I'm talking about an experience. And that's what he's about to define it as right now. Because I know it's a big word. I know Dzogchen is a huge word that could be many things. But for me, when I refer to Dzogchen, I refer to it in this paragraph that I'm going to read, which is that it's an experience. It doesn't have to be told. It doesn't have to be instructed. It's already here. These guys are just pointing out what's obvious, or what should be obvious. All right.
Mark,
Yes.
just for completion's sake, because you said Dzogchen is the culmination of the Tibetan Buddhist teachings. Well, that's technically not quite correct, just to be overly precise, but that's just one aspect of being the summit of the teachings, because you might as well talk about the Langdre teachings, or you might talk about Mahamudra. So those are various forms of the epitome of, and Dzogchen is just one of it. And the other thing is that the Nyingma doesn't precisely adopt the Dzogchen teachings, but it was basically the Buddhist versions of the Dzogchen teachings given by Guru Rinpoche. So just for correctness sake, sorry for interrupting.
No, not at all. And thank you. No, and I everything you said was above my head, but I did hear the word Mahamudra, and I know that's associated with the Dzogchen teaching. So I'm glad you said that, because yes, I noticed in the same file they mentioned those as well. So I appreciate that.
It's not really associated with Dzogchen. It's just another lineage, which is another form of being the summit of the teachings.
Bingo.
Whereas the Dzogchen approach comes through the view and then goes into the meditation. The Mahamudra teachings more go through the meditation to the view. So that's
interesting. See, I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gun. I appreciate that. All right. So again, coming back to the spirit of Dzogchen, so you know when I'm using that word, this is the spirit that I mean it in. So he says, Dzogchen pertains to understanding in one's immediate experience, the primordial state of the individual, the unconditioned nature of mind. This nature of the mind transcends the specific contents of the mind, the thoughts arising in the mind, which reflect one's psychological, cultural, and social conditioning. One may make the same distinction between the mirror, which has the natural and inherent capacity to reflect, and the reflections which are seen in it. The mirror is not to be confused with the reflections that appear in it. And that for me is the essence of everything. That for me was the attraction to the Dzogchen teachings, showing you the difference between, and I think they're going to go into this, I won't go into it, but they go into the differences between, let's say, mind with a capital M and mind with a small m, because different cultures have different teachings, and some teachings will say there's only mind and there's no self, and then other teachings will say there's only self and no mind. So he's going to do a really good job, and I'll get to it, where they just distinguish between mind with a capital M and then mind with, what we usually think of the moving mind. Okay, so that is hilarious. All right. Okay, so the text that we have here, the cycle of the day and night, where one proceeds along the path of the primordial yoga. This is not an academic introduction to Dzogchen. It is neither a treatise on the philosophy of Dzogchen, nor is it a scholarly survey of the extant Dzogchen literature in Tibet. Rather, this is a teaching on the essential points of Dzogchen in practice, to the points of Dzogchen practice. It explains with great precision and detail, although concisely, how to practice contemplation. The Tibetan term Dzogchen is usually translated as the great perfection. This teaching is called the great perfection because it is complete and perfect in itself, there being nothing lacking in it, and because it is great in the sense that there is nothing greater than or beyond it. But fundamentally, the name Dzogchen refers not to a philosophical teaching among other philosophical teachings, but to the primordial state of the individual, our inherent Buddha nature, which is synonymous with the nature of the mind. And that's the whole thing. I'm going to sidetrack just a little bit, because the key point that you're going to see in Dzogchen, if you could say anything is the key, is that the mind is the king that creates everything. Everything you see is the mind. So I use the word aware space, and I'll explain why. But the language that they're using for when I'm saying all there is aware space, there's just this, aware space. That's what they're, same thing that they're saying when there's mind. All there is the mind, and the mind is the king that creates everything. So the mind is creating this, the mind is creating our thoughts, the mind is creating attraction, attachments, identification, all of that is, you know, the mind acting upon itself. So, and now we get to the mind. So the essence of mind, which is primordially pure, is emptiness. And this is the Dharmakaya. Its nature is luminous clarity, which is spontaneously self-perfected. And this is the Sambhogakaya. Its energy is unobstructed and all-pervading, and this is the Nirmanakaya. And once again, I know if you're not familiar with this, it's just going to sound like a bunch of religious jargon, but that is what I used for the basis of the triune model I have. So I'm going to just tell you what that means to me, because I realize, you know, a lot of that's a religious jargon. And by the way, even words like Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, once again, these are huge words that have infinite meanings. And you hear people talking about, you have no idea what they mean by the Dharmakaya, because there's infinite levels that you could be speaking about the Dharmakaya on. So to bring this down to earth, I'm going to tell you what that means to me. And this is the beautiful part. This is actually the essence of why I wrote the triunistic model. The way this whole thing came to be is just a miracle, a magical miracle of impossibilities. Because there's only, and I don't even want to say one thing, but there's only awareness. So there's only awareness, but how does all this appear? That's the thing. There's only awareness, but all this appears. This is here. It's undeniable. It's undeniable we have appearances, but yet there's nothing. Nothing exists, and yet all this appears. And that is why the relationship between the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya are so important, because they actually tell the story of how and why the nothing has no choice but to appear as all this. So I'm just going to interpret what he just said. So the focus that he put on those words were the essence, which is what I call what it is. So in my book, in the triunistic model, there's three things. Reality has three things. It's what it is, what it does, and what it appears as. All three of those things are happening simultaneously. You're looking at the Trikaya right now. You're looking at, so the analogy that I use, if anybody's not familiar with this, the best way you could just get on board and see the way I'm looking at the world is that we're looking at the world of multitudes. We're looking at the world of beginnings and endings. Everything has, you look behind me at the curtains, it's got a beginning and ending. Everything's got a beginning and ending. The only thing that doesn't have a beginning and ending is the awareness, is you back here, is the space awareness. So you get to know that, so you can see the difference between the two. But what they're trying to point out to you is that the emptiness that we're describing, the emptiness that we're always pointing to, it's not just nothing. It's not just a simple nothing. And that's why the difference between Zen and Dzogchen, in Zen and most things, they're just going to refer to the word of emptiness. But in Dzogchen, they'll never say the word emptiness without coupling it with the phrase clarity and emptiness. And it's the inseparability of clarity and emptiness that spontaneously manifests as this. And that's what they mean by the Sambhogakaya, the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. So the way I explain that in my book is the white light would be the Dharmakaya. So the white light is what we're talking about, is this is it. Everything is just the white light. But the white light is awareness, and it has no choice but to bend upon itself. And that would be the Sambhogakaya, resulting in the world that we see. So even though that you're looking at the world of colors and manifest, like I said, beginnings and endings, in reality, it still is the white light. Just the way when you look at a rainbow, you see the rainbow. No one could deny you have the appearance of a rainbow, but we know that it's just white light. And that's what this is. That's what all this is to do, is to help you see the white light, you know, when you're looking at the rainbow. And that's the only reason they bring up those concepts to begin with in the first place, is because the essence of, well, you know what, I'll just read it again. This time when I read it again and take into consideration what I just said about the rainbow, how you have the undifferentiated white light, and then the action of that white light, which in this case is bending, and then the result of that action or conditions. You could look at it conditions. If you have the white light with a certain condition, it's going to appear as a rainbow looking like my room. But if you take that same white light and you introduce different conditions, it's going to look like your room. And so that's all there is. There's the source, there's the one thing, and then there's the actions, the conditions, and then the result. So everything that we're looking at is all three things at the same time. You're looking at the base, the source, what it is. You're looking at the path, which is the conditions, and you're looking at the result, which is your particular world. But your particular world, my particular world, all particular worlds is the white light, but the conditions are making the white light appear as a rainbow configured in the infinite different ways, such as our lives. Okay. So anyway, if anybody's into that, I think I do a much more actually clearer job of going into the triune. So I'm just going to kind of glaze over this for them, because it does sound awfully religious and awfully traditional when they speak of these things. So I'm going to skip a lot of it. But if anybody wants to hear more about the triune and specifically, that will be the group talk I'm going to do on my book. Okay. Oh, iPad, did you have a question? Oh, never mind. Okay. However, in the case, oh, hands up, William. Yes, sir. False call? All right, William. All right, cut in if you need to, William. All right. However, in the case of Dzogchen.
You hear me now?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Hang on now, my sound system doesn't seem to be working. 1 second.
Okay. All right. I'll keep reading so that way you know I'm still here. William. All right. The Trikaya is already fully manifest as the nature of mind from the very beginning. Although it has gone unrecognized due to accumulated layers of emotional and intellectual obscurations. All right, oh, guess William's gone. All right, I'll be here when you get back, William. Anyway, all right. Although unrecognized, the Trikaya is already from the very beginning fully manifest as the essence, nature, and energy of the mind. Thus, we could say of Dzogchen that the foundation is the Trikaya. The path is the Trikaya.
Oh, right. Support.
Oh, you know what? I think someone's got their thing on and they left the room. Hey, Susan,
Mark,
how you
Mark,
doing?
you can mute people.
Oh, I can? Yeah. How do I do that? Do I go over her thing and mute? Yeah, let's mute iPad.
Yeah.
All right, my iPad. Good to see you, Susan. All right. Yay. All right. All right. Okay. Thus, we could say of Dzogchen that the foundation is the Trikaya, the path is the Trikaya, and the fruit is the Trikaya.
Peter?
Dzogchen represents.
Sorry, Mark.
Yes.
Can I interrupt it?
Absolutely.
Again? Back to you just explained kind of the white light, and then the white light folds in on itself and creates the reality that we all see. And then there's another step of the reality that we experience personally. So they're kind of, if I pick that up properly, there are sort of 3 steps to that, to go from like the nothingness or just awareness, and then like, where does all this stuff come from? Well, that's where it all comes from, and boils down to what each one of us experiences personally. How do you experience that in your daily life at this point compared with how you experienced it 30 years ago?
Oh, I could tell you
briefly.
I could tell you my experience of it. It's changing almost, I want to say almost changing daily. It's deepening daily. But that's new. That hasn't always been the case. There was a good 10-year window where there was no deepening of it. That was a cocooning aspect. So anything. Go ahead.
Do you feel, compared with the way you were before, do you feel detached from the life that you're living? I
don't. But if we talked about it, maybe I would come to say, yes, I feel detached if we had a conversation, but I wouldn't say that. I don't feel detached. But maybe if we had a conversation about it, it would turns out I do feel detached, but I wouldn't, that's not coming from me naturally, if that makes any sense.
Do you sort of move in and out of different states of the witness, for instance?
No, it's
You're always the same.
Always the same. Absolutely. Now, when I say always the same, that's not true. I mean, nothing's always the same. I'm trying to answer the essence of what you're saying and also address the specifics. Because there's a lot of questions there. So obviously nothing's the same. All right. So nothing is the same because.
Here, let me give you a pretty low-level example based on my own experiences. Let's say right now, you and I are talking and I'm interested in what you're going to say. And I'm also thinking about what my next question is going to be based on whatever your answer is going to be. And I'm I'm very focused in and committed 100% intellectually, emotionally, and my attention is on you right now. Now, when you start talking, I will step back from that a little bit. And depending on what you're saying, I might even step into the witness where I'm just sort of watching what's going on. I'm still involved and I'm still interested, but I don't have that same level of involvement as I did when, like right now, because I'm talking, and I'll step back from that. And then there's a further stepping back, maybe when you're, as an example, somebody else chimes in and I'm watching the two of you talk and I'm still interested, but I'm not as personally involved in it anymore.
Yes. Okay. That gets back to the original question. And so there I probably gave you actually an incorrect answer. When I was saying I don't feel detached, and I said, but I did say if we were to talk about it, maybe I would change my answer. After you said that, yes, I do say now, I go through life 100% detached. And this is what I mean by that. I'll explain it. And this is something I was trying to explain to my wife. So this is what I meant when I said you have to decide upon your agenda. I don't know if anyone remember my first thing. You have to remember your game. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're doing something no matter what. You do have an agenda. And if you don't know what it is, it's just going to be unconscious and you're following some agenda. So I started at a point where I took very conscious control over my agenda. I knew that this is the only way out and the only thing that matters is the mind. And to know that, because that's the only thing that's going to stay after this. When you die, everything's going to be gone. Everything that you've built up, the only thing that's going to stay is what's remaining, which is the aware space. Everything else is going to be gone. So the only thing I knew I want to invest in is this. So I made a commitment that I'm going to live my life as if nothing else matters, but getting to know this aware space, because it's going to flick off. It's going to turn off and you're going to be left with just a TV screen. All the things are going to go away except for the screen. That's all going to be left with. And if you don't know that, you just get sucked up, and start all over again. So I was extremely committed. Like I said, for that first point, there was the recognition and then there was the commitment. This is the only thing that's worth living. This is the only thing that's worth putting my energy into. So I made a commitment, and like I said, it's a descendant agenda where, like I said, like the Olympic athlete, all I care about is this. And I call it the big game. There's the big game, and then there's the little game. The little game is the game that everybody's playing about being right or being correct or looking good or having money or having a girlfriend or accumulating things or feeling good, even happiness. All these different things are the little game. For me, it's when I say the big game is backing up so deep that you're almost aware of the person that you were before you were born, and you want to be more loyal to that person than to this person here. It's like I got a commitment to something bigger. When I die, all this is going to go away, but something's going to remain. And I want my agenda, I want my loyalty to be to that. I want my devotion, I want to put all my eggs in that basket, that thing that stays, whatever that is, the aware space that stays. So you look at the world like that. Everything you go out the world, everything, just like the Olympic athlete, how is this going to help my game? How is that going to help my game? How is that food going to affect me? How is that person going to affect me? You become that maddened like a crazy person. No, I take it back. Here's a better way to explain it. You just start off in your game. I'm now committed. I saw it. I recognized it. I'm going to commit. When I wake up, I'm looking at the world, not through the lens that 99.9999% of the people are living by, but I'm looking at through my lens, which is that this is just an experience and that I need to make the most of this experience so I could nurture the only thing that actually stays, which is just the aware space. So I want to put all my eggs in that basket. So when you go out into the world, you're going to find that all your actions and all the way you behave with people, it's going to change who you are. And I know this because now I'm giving all these tips to my wife. So now I'm going back and looking at my life and how I've created this life, and I'm looking backwards to how I created it. And there's certain things like Mary, the whole reason we're having this conversation now is because it changes the way I dialogue with people. It changes the way I interact with the world. It changes the way I do anything because I'm always in my game. My game is just to always be aware that I'm in aware space, looking at the contents, and these contents are the miraculous display of Dharmakaya. Here it is, and it's teaching me. So when I go into it, I don't look at, so when I'm looking at the world, I'm looking, here's the thing. This is what I didn't realize until I started talking to my wife. I don't look at the world and, there's so many different levels to this, but the level that's most helpful to people that are practicing, and this isn't the way I look at the world now, but the most helpful way to look at the world is to look at the world like you're trying to stay in your game and all the people in the world are playing their game. So they're going to try to pull you out with their tendencies, whether it be fights or whether it be over explaining or whether it be talking too much, anything just to keep things on that level of thinking and discursive thoughts. And your goal is to not play that, to play a deep game where I'm committed to peace. You go into the situation, I'm committed to peace. I've committed myself to peace. And when I go into the situation, it's not important whatever the people are doing. I could be in the room with a tyrant. I could be in the room with the crazy person. None of that matters because the only thing that I have control over is my reactions to it. So that's where my laboratory is. That's what I'm watching is my reactions to this thing. So the world's happening. You're doing these things. So three things are going on. Number one, you're seeing the world and they're doing their thing. And then number two, you're not just witnessing the world, but you're also watching your reaction to it. And now you're seeing that's actually still part of the world. Your reaction to what you're seeing, your judgment of it, your complaining about it, your resistance to it is still part of the world. That's form. Your tension, your anxiety had a beginning and it'll have an ending. That's something that could be observed. So then you back up, then you're watching that, then you're watching your reaction. And then all this backing up is what brings you back to mind, which is what encompasses everything, your thoughts, your feelings, your identification, which is the place where you want your practice anyway. So everything points you back to your practice, whether it be screaming bosses or traffic, because you're just out in the world, you're into it. So you go into it just an open attitude. Here I am, world, go ahead, do your thing. I'm just, for me, it's listening to music. You're just getting into whatever you want to do. Then the world presents itself. And then when the world presents itself, for me, I'm not thinking about it much until you see something that you have a reaction. Now your reaction becomes part of that. Now you're observing that. And then that points you back to the space. And once again, you just realize that that's the only thing that matters and that everything points you back there, even the bad things. But anyway, getting back to your question about the detachment. So
Is
yeah.
that, before you, to finish that thought of yours, so is that where you are now? Is that how you live your life, perceive reality as it presents itself to you?
I'm going through a unique thing now, because I went through a stage that I went through, like, let's say 10 years, where I was completely cutting myself off from the world. I was the most disingenuous, the most dishonest, the most withholding, is that the word? Withholding person, because I had to. Like I said, for me, there was nothing that could be, there's nothing that could be discussed. There's nothing, I saw where everything went, and I just gave up on talking. But then I had an experience to where now I'm feeling the opposite. Now I'm feeling invigorated and enthused to share. So my mindset switched to where now all of a sudden, when I used to, let's say, go to work, no one would know anything about me. My goal was to shut down every conversation with as little words as possible. Like, I became an expert how to just shut down every conversation, because I knew everything I say would just add to the conversation. So my thing in life was being invisible. I would just shut everything down. I knew how to, like, not make conversations last. I knew how to just shut everything down, so I wouldn't make myself available. But then after this epiphany that I had just a year or two ago, I felt the opposite. All of a sudden, I was more drawn towards opening myself up to the people at work, opening myself up to their experiences, opening myself up to what they had to offer.
What was that? What was that epiphany, if you don't mind?
Oh gosh, well, it was in the second book, so you haven't read the second book. I don't want to ruin it for everybody, so it's hard to tell you the epiphany. Well, let me just think about it. Let me tell you a way I could tell you. I'll tell you the epiphany without ruining it. Oh, actually, it was Jordan Peterson. That's what it was. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Jordan Peterson. I was listening to him. So like I said, I never listened to anything spiritual in 20 years. I went from listening to comedy led into Joe Rogan, and then Joe Rogan led into Jordan Peterson. So I was listening to Jordan Peterson, and he was just talking about two things. I don't remember the second thing, but I'll say one thing, so at least I could give you a tidbit, but it's not the real thing. But the tidbit, what he said was this childish fantasy, or this childish need for a permanent vacation. Oh, I see you, Sandran. And that was me. That spoke to me. If you read my first book, I celebrated that. I was braggadocious about it. I'm done with life. I quit. I surrender. I'm retiring from life. My life is now a vacation, and I believe that. But he was talking about, like, how childish that is. That like, walk you through it. You're going on your vacation. You're sitting in the hammock, and you're indulging and you're drinking. But at some point, you're going to want something else. So, but like I said, that wasn't the real epiphany. That was just one of the tidbits that he said. But he said something. I don't remember what it was, but he said something that made me just want to share. And I'm sorry. It's in my book. I will say that. It's in my book. But something that made me want to share. Oh, maybe it was being wasted. And to be honest with you, where are you? You gone already? You just asked the question. Oh, there you are, Mary. All right. To be honest with you, I don't think it could have been helped. I really think everything is a cycle. I don't know if you saw my thing about like a clock, like everything's like a cycle on a clock, to where it starts out, like, let's say you roll down the clock, you're going to go super fast, have momentum.
Yeah.
As you go halfway through the clock, you're going to meet resistance. It's going to slow down. I think it was natural, so it's really not really important. I naturally met the end of my cocooning phase. It was simple as that. I came to the end of my cocooning phase of what was necessary. And Jordan Peterson's words happened to trigger me that, you know what, I do want to say this, but this time it's going to be fun. It doesn't have to be, serious. And that's why I dropped out the first time, because when I didn't intend to put out a book, but when I did, it became serious, and I got scared and I backed out. But he gave me the epiphany. It doesn't have to be serious. I could just do it my fun way, do it my weird way. And it doesn't have to be serious. And I could, but like I said, to be honest with you, Mary, I'll just come back to the point. I don't think it could have been helped. I think the cocooning phase was done, and I was just ready to come out and talk. And Jordan Peterson just happened to be the guy that spoke to me. But
yeah,
anyway.
if you don't mind a comment or observation from me, is that most people or I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people, depending on your life circumstances, will have some significant downtime after they've had a profound spiritual awakening. I've been in isolation for 8 years now, but I don't have to work. I do work, but I work online. And so I don't have to go outside if I don't want to. And usually I'll spend maybe a month, 2 months, and I won't have a physical conversation unless the clerk at the grocery store speaks to me. And most of the time I check out, you know, self-checkout. I don't have occasion to speak to anybody for long periods of time. So, you know, like Eckhart Tolle supposedly laid on a park bench for a certain period of time. And not that I'm equating myself or my experiences with his, or in particular Ramana Maharshi, who went down in that hole for umpteen years and worked through whatever he did during that time. But you had to work the entire time, and you were married and you had a child during that period. So that was the best you could do, obviously. And then that period came to an end, obviously, as you're explaining now. But that's quite interesting. And then it's also interesting that somebody who leads a quote unquote normal life can have these experiences and go through the process and come out at the same place as the fortunate ones who are able to sit in caves in the Himalayas.
Yeah, and you're right though. I created a life for myself. I lived in the mountains where for 17 years, we were 20 minutes from a paved road, no traffic light in the whole county, 50 minutes from internet, no cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone until I moved to Florida in 2017. So like I said, nature will take you there where you need to be, and it needed that. I needed that. But now I'm out in the open. Now I'm the opposite. Now I want to move to the city. I want to be part of the people. But anyway, we got other questions. So thank you, Mary. I appreciate that. So Sandra, I'm interested in what you have to say. You got to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I might have kind of forgot now. Well, I was going to say that, you know, that neither way is, you know, of course, there's no right or wrong. I mean, wherever you are led to, you are supposed to be. You can't actually be where you're not supposed to be or doing anything that you aren't supposed to be doing. I mean, it's not even like that, because it's really unfolding for you, not by you, you know.
That's powerful. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's happening on its own. You couldn't have said anything more true than that. And that's actually what I was trying to capture when I was saying it couldn't have been helped that I was coming out of the cocoon. And that's why I love that cycle of the clock. We can't help we are on the clock cycle, because we're here from the conditions that preceded us, and now we're creating the next set of conditions, and we just can't help that the momentum is taking us, you know, in the direction that we happen to be. So yeah, I appreciate that, Sam. That's powerful. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I think there's a time, you know, when you know that every moment is perfect, it can't be imperfect.
Yeah.
Nothing can be imperfect.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah,
it's a different experience, because there is no resistance there. It is perfect already. So you don't have to use your mind to figure anything out.
Yeah.
You just, you know what I mean?
I do. And the word that you reminded me of is to not feel like you have to modify anything about the world. It is what it is, and you don't not the feeling that you have to modify anything, or even our thoughts. And that, I think, is even a deeper thing, that we don't even have to modify anything even about our thoughts, even because I know, you know, ever since I started talking about this, people have concerns about their thoughts and anxieties and feelings. And even those, you don't have any controls over those, and they're perfectly fine. They're spontaneously arising too. Your thoughts, your anxieties, everything, they're spontaneously arising and moving away from you. And the only thing you could do is give them too much attention, the same way you give, let's say, your parents too much attention, or politics too much attention, or religion too much attention, or your family too much attention, or yourself too much attention. And that's why, for me, like I said, the attention is on the foundation. the very root, because anything that we do that we give our attention to, that just gives it life. So whether it be like you were saying, Sandra, the world, all you could do is just, feed it life with your attention, or your own thoughts. If you're, too focused on your thoughts or things, because these things, like I said, they have a beginning and they have an end. Anything that has a beginning, it arose and it'll disappear. Oh, there's one thing that doesn't rise and there's one thing that doesn't disappear. Oh, sorry, I got off track a little, Sandra.
But even if you did give it your attention, even that would be right. I mean,
that's to be honest with you, Sandra, right? That is a deeper point. That is a deeper point. That to me is the most liberating point. It does not matter. That's part of the perfect spontaneous arising. And if you attach to that, that's also part of the spontaneous arising. To me, there's nothing more profound than that. That's more profound than just saying, oh, just don't have any thoughts. That's not profound. The profound thing to realize is even the thoughts are part of it. Even that's part of it. Even this thought is part of it. Anything that's content is part of it. And that's not the aware space. So thank you. I love that. That's more deeper than anything. So thank you. And by the way, that's the confidence. That's why people should be able to go on in confidence, that you don't have to constantly check yourself. You don't have to constantly say, where am I at? Or is this okay? Or did I do this? At any point, just drop that thought and then drop that thought. You're always home. That's the whole point, was we're always home. We're always here. No one's trying to point you to someplace else. No one's not trying to bring anything extra to it. It's just pointing out what's already here. And that exercise that Sandra just did is exactly what brings you back here. Oh, I had the thought. There I go attaching. Oh, that's okay. You could drop that. But I didn't drop that. I held on to it. But guess what? You could drop that. And fucking infinity is waiting for you every moment of the day. And the thing is the more you treasure that, the more you are attracted to that, the minute you cultivate that, the more you're going to notice it. And the more you'll notice that you're getting caught. Like I've noticed, so for me, there's like three things. You're either in a state of either, so let's say the spontaneous arisings happen, they come across you, and you use your attention, and you take your attention and you pay attention to that particular thought. So you start inflating it. What's going to happen because of your practice is you're going to recognize that. And that's the beauty of it. Just like Sandra said, they recognize that, oh, look at me, I'm lost in thoughts. That's beautiful. The recognition is there, and spontaneously you drop it because that's your practice. You know your homing signal is nothingness, so you just know to drop it, not because you have to, but because you're reminded, oh, that's right, I've let my attention arise to this arising ornament. And now that I recognize it, I'm going to drop it just because that's what I'm about. That's my game. That's what I do. When I recognize I'm doing it, I drop it. And then as soon as you drop it, boom, you're right down and you go forward in confidence because you recognize that anytime you do get swept up in arising, you'll recognize it and drop it. Go against confidently. Recognize, drop, go confidently. Recognize, drop, go confidently. That's it. Then you never need a teacher. You never need nothing. It's like, I liken it to like calories. It's really as simple as if you're trying to tell someone to lose weight. It's just mathematical. Just eat less calories than you do. And that's what this whole thing is. Just cultivate the emptiness, cultivate the nothing, the spaciousness. If you cultivate that and put more attention on that, that is what, well, you're giving attention to it. So that's what's going to enrich you. And that's how you're going to see the world. When you see the world, then you're going to recognize the space in the world. Then you're going to recognize the emptiness in the world because you recognize it as what you are.
Well, Mark, isn't that the essence of Dzogchen anyway? Awareness of awareness.
That's exactly. And
I mean, that's the essence of that teaching, is it not?
You know why? You know what? You're right. You know what? That's perfect. You said that because that is an example of what they call the triune. The only thing awareness is capable, since all there is awareness, all it's capable of doing is being aware. That's it. There's just awareness. So its base, what its essence is awareness. And what its nature is, what it does is it bees aware. And then the fruit is just a result of the fact that there's nothing else but awareness. So there's nothing else to be aware of. Thus, what Rod said, awareness of itself. But that is the, in Dzogchen, what they call the essence, the nature, and the energy. So the essence is just awareness, but its nature is to be aware. That is the nature of awareness. And then the energy is what happens when awareness has no choice but to become aware of itself. And boom, now you got, what in Zen's called the myriad things, the infinite possibilities, the multitude of infinite possibilities, like the rainbow. So anyway, Nubin. Oh, I'm sorry, Sandra, was that it? Did you have anything else?
No, I mean, I think, you know, it's only the character that is holding on to anything. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Even the
that's
character's part of it. And you can even
Yeah.
see the character. Even the character's there. The character's something that has a beginning and an ending. You could witness the character. So yeah, thank you, Sandra. You're right. It's more powerful to realize you could even let that go than the dynamic of just letting go in the first place. So thank you. All right, Nubin. Yes, sir.
Hey, yeah, I was just gonna add to, like, Sandra basically led it to the same place that I was going to kind of lead to, but I would add that to your point of, like, you were rejecting advances from people in terms of talking to them, or, you know, you were isolating yourself. So I found a similar thing, that, like, whatever my problems were, or where I thought, oh, this is like, it was weird, the duality of it, because I was, in my mind, I was becoming more spiritual as I was, like, naturally growing detached, but I was also like doing things which were not so spiritual, like people are being nice to me and I'm not really accepting it. So what I found was, like, and I found this through, like, I could relate to it later, like what Adyashanti, someone like Adyashanti, or who's that, Gangaji, they talk about. It's like a backward step. I was like, let me just take a look at it. Like, let me just see where it goes if I allow things to, you know, if I accept it. Like, if somebody's being nice to me, if I have a problem and somebody's offering me a solution, and I am like, oh, I think this won't work, but what if I just shut that part down and I just accept that and be like the laziest person that there is, who just accepts things from people or the world? And I realized that it was always in plain sight. And it's like, if you're stuck in a video game, you're not doing the easiest thing possible, and you're using your mind to do the difficult, tricky things, because I think that's what's going to lead to. But then doing the simplest thing just unravels everything.
That's beautiful. That's perfect. I have to comment on something you said there, because this has been coming up a lot for me. And I had to write it down. You said a back step. You talk about a back step?
Yeah, like not looking for, it's like some kind of spiritual bliss is out there. Like, it's hidden in plain sight. It's right in front of you already.
You know, it's amazing. And the only, it's funny, I wouldn't have brought this up, but my wife just had her kind of like a weird paranormal experience, or, you know, just just an odd experience. When I was talking to her, we were talking about all this, and like I said, she's really getting into this, and these teachings are on all the day on our YouTube, you know, just playing all the time, these talks. And while we were talking about something, all of a sudden she was like trying to teach me something. She was like, and what she said was, and the reason that you got my attention was, she was like, you have to take a back step. And when anytime people say something like that, it really grabs my attention, because of this experience that I had. I don't know if you know, but the experience that I had was
backing out. Yeah.
Okay. So that's been very profound. And the reason it's so profound for me is because it's one of the rare things that I don't see in literature. Maybe Rod or Gunnar or somebody would, you know, be able to tell me where it does appear in history or in our records, but I couldn't find it. I never have seen anybody mention that there's nothing behind us. So for me, whenever I'd hear any type of hint about somebody seeing something behind them or something backwards, it grabs my ears. And the reason I mention this is because the only time I'd hear about that in Zen, they use that expression that they use. They say you have to take a back step. And that used to always weird me out. I was like, what are they talking about? Because the back step is that, stepping into that, backstepping. But anyways, let me just tell you about what my wife said, which I thought was extremely profound. So she's trying to explain, like, she's in some state, she's in some weird state, and she's trying to explain to me with words. And what she was trying to tell me was, you can't drop down until you go back. She said it had to be a two-step process. And instead of trying to walk you through the story, I'm just going to get to the end and tell you all the interpretations that I did, what I think, what she was trying to tell me. So I'm always trying to tell her it's about just dropping out, dropping into emptiness. So there's nothing but just outer space everywhere, just dropping, and there's nothing, it just leaves you to, there's nothing but empty space. So what she was feeling like, it's kind of like a coat hook. So let's say if you're trying to take a coat hook off the door and you just try to snatch it, you can't do it. You have to go kind of up and down, right? With like a coat hook. So I felt like what she was trying to explain to me, she's like, you can't go down. You have to go back and then down. And what I got from her experience was what she was trying to explain to me physically with her words was it felt like she was standing at the edge of an elevator shaft or a cliff, but with the cliff behind her or the elevator shaft behind her. So she's staring and looking at me, and I'm trying to give her instructions how to fucking drop down into infinity. And she says, I can't drop. But if you step back, the dropping happens. You can't intentionally go down, but if you go back, the dropping just happens. Just kind of like if you lift up on the coat hook, the down just happens automatically. So I felt like that's what she was trying to tell me. I was getting so excited because of my experience of seeing behind me, but she was trying to tell me it's a two-step process, and it's the back step. What I'm hearing from Zen and Nubin. So I'm curious.
And it's the,
well, go ahead. A lot of hands.
Sorry, I was just going to add that I think the first part is like realizing or accepting that you can't win this, like this, by trying to win this. Like you just accept if you like, I can't do it anymore, and that's when it like.
Dude, you are singing my
song.
Itself. I'm sorry, dude. I just gotta say, you were singing my song. That is my song.
Sorry about snapping my fingers. I don't know how loud that was.
Go ahead,
I think it's important to know that, to understand that you don't know what you think you know. Whatever you think you know, you have to drop. You don't know it. And that's I think the understanding. Because you see what you think you will. If you think you know it, then that's what you see. But if you don't know, then it's different.
Yeah. And anything that you would see would just be the mind. That's the only thing that could possibly exist is imagination. Whether it be bardas or heavens or gods, or the only thing that's capable of existing is imagination, because that's all there is awareness. What awareness does is it imagines. So anything that you're seeing, oh, and I forgot, wait, what did you just say, Sandra? There was another point I wanted to hit on that. What did you just say?
Well, that you don't know.
Yes, you don't know. I'm sorry.
You got to stop knowing what you think you know.
I got to say
because that you don't actually know it. You just heard it.
I love it.
Or learned it.
I love it, because if you think about it, every single teaching, every wisdom teaching, whether it's Zen or anybody, they're all going to use words like Sandra Ann's talking about. Like in Zen, one of my favorite Zen masters, Song San, he said, for the last 10 years, I don't teach Zen. I just teach don't know mind. And then everybody's familiar with Shunryu Suzuki's Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, or Dogen's Unborn Mind. Or you could look at Nagarjuna's or Nagarjuna's, I forgot how to pronounce his name, of it's not this nor that, nor both this nor that, not neither of this. That brings you to the unknown mind, that vacuumous space of nothing. And that's
the traditional back step. Well, okay, so there might be a scholar here to not back me up on this, but that's in a Veda, it's who's asking the question, who am I? That is the back step. Yes. That is what takes you into the
who am I? Yes.
That's the door that opens into the void back there. Douglas Harding obviously is is like the first modern guy I ever heard to say, hey, there's nothing back there. Just put your hand there and it disappears, like boom. Yeah. You've got living proof that there's nothing back there.
Yeah. Well,
but in Zen, it's always, who is this fellow? Show me this fellow who's asking this question. Who is this person? And the student's always like, oh, what the fuck, And then it's the same thing in a Veda, Maharshi and Nisargadatta. Yeah. It's who is this? And that is the backing up. That's what that is.
I'm curious.
Is a pointer to back up.
Just out of curiosity, without having this as a thing, why do you think they use the expression backing up? What significance does backing up have if it's not this?
It is that. That's what I'm saying. It's like,
so they are aware of that.
The thing is they didn't have iconography and graphic representation like we do now.
Wow.
And that's one of the things, that's the whole reason I'm engaging with you, is because your model is Western for a Western mind, and we're not having to interpret all this Eastern philosophy and Eastern poetic mysticism, and which is good stuff. I mean, it's good study.
I know.
But this is like, this is, you know, Western knowledge, Western understanding, Western model verbiage concepts that we all can just go, yeah, I get that.
It's
I get
tangible.
that.
It's tangible.
And it comes from like a scientific, you know, like your medical training or whatever your, you know, forgive me, it's been a while since I read your books. It's based in that, it's based in that kind of logic. It's a Western logic versus an Eastern logic versus poetry versus science. So I think your books, you know, maybe refocus the conversation and say, why are you talking about Dzogchen again? You know, like, why are you telling us about Dzogchen, and refocus the conversation again?
Yeah.
For the YouTube crowd. Yes.
Actually, it's interesting you say that. I did not intend to do this Dzogchen talk that we're doing now. I accidentally wrote that out. What I really meant to say was I want to do a group talk on my book, and because on the side in my personal life, what was happening was my life got back into the teachings, and then it got me reinvigorated to the teachings. What I thought I was saying on the side, I'm going to sit there and read a book to myself with not a group, and then interpret it slowly how it means to me, because of what you said, because it's true that it's all weird verbiage and it's all based on tradition and it's just concepts. But because, like I said, there's some magnet, there's some weird magic there that opens up keys for me intuitively. The original project was, I was just going to slowly read this by myself and then give interpretations of what it meant to me. But when I sent that email out, everybody interpreted it as I was going to have a group talk like this on Dzogchen, and more people, I got more responses about that than about me. More people were interested in hearing about Dzogchen than my book. So I was like, screw it. Because like I said, I'm excited to talk about this because of what's going on in my personal life. But I don't know how to say this without sounding, you know, arrogant, but I do think if you do want to learn about the Trikaya specifically, you're definitely better off listening to me than these guys, because they just don't, like he says, they don't have the capability to interpret it in a Western way that offers epiphanies, that gets things clicking, that you're able to see it for yourself and like, oh, this sounded illogical and paradoxical. But now that I have an example how we always see some things in life that are paradoxical, and yet I see it. So if I could see that the same way, it'll help me resolve that same paradox. So to answer your question, the Dzogchen thing came about something accidentally, but I'm glad you said that, because I definitely do. People encourage them, if they are interested in this really on a deep level, then to also do my monthly talk, that because it is going to be on the Triune. And you're right, that does deserve, and that's what this was supposed to be, Rod. This was supposed to be on that. But like I said, I just switched it because everybody was interested in the Dzogchen and nobody's interested in me. So I have to take what I could get.
Well, that might be an interpretation, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, that isn't true.
Yeah.
We've been asking you questions about your own experience, and that's what we're here for, to find out more about you.
We got you off the Dzogchen and started asking you about stuff. So
no, anyway. I appreciate that. And you know what? I'm so glad you said that, because there was one of the last things I read when I was reading that Dzogchen book, I could just feel it, like, because of it's different when you have an audience with you and when you're by yourself. When you're with an audience, when you're reading the same words, you're also aware of how they're going to come across to, let's face it, a broad and generalized audience. So it's like, I know I'm speaking gibberish as I'm saying it, because I'm thinking, oh my God, even if there's two people in the crowd that don't know this, like, I've lost them. So no, I appreciate that. But the good news is I will continue, because I mean, maybe we won't have time now, but generally speaking, I will continue in this. But I will make sure that the things I highlight and read with the Dzogchen are only relevant to what I'm talking about anyway. And by the way, the reason why I find it relevant, the Dzogchen stuff, is just because, like I said, I have it in my background listening to it, and all it is just pointing. It's just constant pointing, and it's constant pointing. So, but anyway, Rod, we'll do both. My thing, and then I'll make the next time we do a Dzogchen talk, I will keep it simple and really go out of my way to avoid the big words. Just out of curiosity, by a show of hands, thank you, Rod, I appreciate that. By a show of hands, how many people here are familiar with Dzogchen before talking about this? Oh, really? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Then you know what, Rod? I definitely thank you. I really appreciate that. And that you just changed the course of how I'm going to do this. So, well, I'll tell you what, I mean, we've already gone over an hour and a half. So with the rest of the time, I want to do two things. One, I want to plan on, you know, how we could do this before and what everybody wants. And also, feedback. So before I get into the stuff that I want to talk about, which is, you know, when's a good time for us to talk, Ben, and what topics do you guys like the most? Before I get to that, is there anything else? I see Sandra and Guna. Do you have any questions or comments about anything we did talk about today?
Yes, well, no, can you hear me now?
Yes, so I can see you and hear you.
Number one is I suspect that Sandra Ann has her hand up just because she didn't put it down again. So
okay. Why don't you blink it if you okay, you're right.
Then next thing, I just wanted to agree with Rod that your suspicion that, or you're noticing that you couldn't find the backing up thing in the East, has a lot to do with the fact that I think the optical sense, like the traditional teachings, they cover all sense consciousnesses and the mind consciousness simultaneously. And never in history has humankind be so obsessed with the visual aspect of your mind. So the sense of wanting to back up is a metaphor that is born from being obsessed with the sense of sight, the eye consciousness. Because regarding your hearing, the sense of back or your feeling, the sense of back and front doesn't make so much difference.
It's not spatial, yeah.
Yeah. So they when they speak about going to the basis, to the nature of your mind or the essence of your mind, they cover all the sense consciousnesses simultaneously. While when you speak of backing up, you're mostly speaking to the eye consciousness. Yeah. And that's why explains a lot of about the success of this headless way with Douglas Harding and your thing. It's because we are so optically obsessed with television and all that and the internet. I think that's just the whole story of that.
And also, Guna, so you have, because you're more well read in these things. So the whole thing about the back step that Nubin was talking about, that is something that you've noticed come up in Zen or in philosophies, this concept of a back step?
Well, I don't recall this particular wording, but I think that this wording has to do with
the method, the actual,
how do you say, our preoccupation with the eyesight.
Yeah.
So they have, I would have to think of terminology that would correspond to that. And maybe I'm not here with stage right, not able to come up with it quickly enough, but I will find terminology that will correspond to that.
Yeah,
so
I appreciate that.
I don't think there's anything new about backing up, essentially. There's the sense of widening or defocusing, for instance, right? That's all over the place. The sense of in Mahamudra, for instance, there's this sense of non-fabrication. Right, so any focusing on an object is a fabrication of your mind towards an object, and that's so the word non-fabricated is corresponding to backing up in the sense that it's not imprisoning the mind and being fixated on an object.
Well,
so,
looking, if I may say real quick, Gunnar, looking for your original face in Zen,
exactly,
is a backing up process.
Exactly.
But it's not said back up. which is a good, you know, like, you know, as Gunnar's saying, it's based on our visual, but it's also just a Western way of looking at it. Just back up. It's like a farm boy.
Yeah.
You know,
oh,
back the tractor up,
Yeah.
son. You know, it's not like, oh, go into yourself and figure it out in
Yeah.
order to back the tractor up.
No,
That's not how the Western mind works.
And you know, it's funny you say that, Rod, because I just realized it's the opposite. You just said go in yourself. It's the opposite. You're encompassing. When you back up, I mean, I guess technically you're going in yourself, but the experience isn't that you're going in yourself. The experience is that you're becoming more encompassing. So things are in you, but I could see why you would say you're going in yourself, because even technically by my thing, that's what I'm talking about. You're dropping.
That's what you're doing.
Yeah,
you
you're
are
dropping
going
into it. Yeah.
Because there is no other direction to go in. That is the only direction.
But it's funny because the opposite happens. Instead, when you do that, instead of you're encompassing, which is like the opposite of being in, going in, because when you drop back, you see that you're the encompassing thing of the in.
Right. That's because you already have, as the Dzogchen teachings say, you have the insight, the ground of being, and then you have the fruit of that, and the thing that's in between is the process.
Yeah,
and the process,
that's it.
the process
That's
is either
it.
going to be meditation,
That's
Dzogchen, Aveda Vedanta, Zen. That's the mystical part, kind of in between, the Holy Spirit, whatever. You have this and this, and now you're trying to figure out what keeps me going in between these two.
And go ahead, Gunnar. Well, if you don't,
finish that. I have a list of points which I'm almost finished with, but maybe that's still point number one.
Well, that reminds me of something Mary said before when she was talking about the relationship between the white light and then the bending in the rainbow. The way I explain with that model is the multitude of things, the infinite variety of universes. You got Sandra, we got Susan, we got Judy, we got Blaine, we got all these infinite things. The way you explain, the way, at least the way I explain that, is that the oh man, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was referring to, Mark.
Oh yes, the bending. So to answer your question, what would make the difference is the specific bend. So the specific bend would be what I call the conditions. To me, everything is just conditions. That's the second part. The conditions are what's going to determine what the white light manifests as. So there's just white light, and then also the conditions of the white light. So a different bend is going to cause a different rainbow. So just imagine you taking one white light and you bend it and you get a classic rainbow, but you bend it a different way, you get a different looking rainbow. And everything we see is just infinite ways you could bend that light. Does that make sense? Is that helpful? So the conditions, there's infinite conditions, which means there's infinite ways that the light can manifest, because the white
bending
light
causes the conditions.
What's
bending,
that?
The bending causes the conditions.
Exactly.
It creates the pressure zones.
Exactly. And there's infinite ways you could bend it, which is why we have the multitude. There's infinite different ways, which is what we see, which is what's evident. What we see is a multitude of nature repeating itself infinitely with slightly different permutations. Every single infinite possibility with every single permutation in between. All right, go ahead, Guna, before I go off on my...
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, maybe one technical point in between, because that's quick. I mean, it's your show. I don't mind how you do it. I'm just wondering, I thought you were going through the text, but...
We did, but now it's 2 hours, so we're wrapping up.
The way you do it this way, you will never get through any 5-line paragraph. Okay, so that's just one remark.
Well, that's why we'll have two. We'll have two, Guna. One, if you guys I hope you guys will come to both, but if we could have one focused on my book and concepts and the fun stuff, and then some...
I don't mind. You can do it any way you want. I'm just reminding you of the fact that this way you'll never finish the project. But the other thing is that there's several points of branching or jumping off points where we could do a deep dive.
Yeah, I like it.
And this every point in itself would take at least 2 or 3 hours. And one of the interesting points that just came up was that somebody, I don't know who was, mentioned that isn't the essence of Dzogchen awareness of awareness. And that corresponds with this thing of yours that you're saying, what it is and what it does. This transition from what it is to the bending is its nature. So there's no way of it not being able to do that. And those 2 points are related, and I find this very interesting. First of all, I doubt that at least traditionally, that Dzogchen would formulate itself as being awareness of awareness, because the Rigpa, which Dzogchen speaks of, is primordial awareness, and it's not an awareness of anything.
I was going to say, because of the word of. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There is no of in primordial awareness, not even of itself, right? Because the moment you are aware of yourself, you're making yourself into an object, and that's not it.
Yeah.
So primordial awareness is not aware of itself as primordial awareness. It's just what it is. Whatever it is, even if it is, it's probably beyond language. You would know more about that than I, but
no, and you're absolutely right, Guna, and you're right, you're absolutely right. And these
technically, it's wrong to call it an off, and especially the word itself is doubtful. Now, that may sound like hair splitting to somebody else, but it's not for those guys. They would criticize that.
Yeah.
It was stated. It was stated in the context, Guna, of the second step of the process.
Yeah.
Because you don't get to that there's no of unless you kind of start with awareness of awareness, and then you'll get to the fact that that's wrong.
But that's introductory. That's such a kind of a leading to statement. It's like a pedagogical statement to lead somebody to that. But the ultimate nature of awareness would not be an itself and not an of. That I just wanted to throw in as a matter of correctness in defense of tradition. And
hey, real quick though, Guna, before we jump off that, there's a very good teaching point in there that I like. That to me, what you just described, what you and Rod were just describing, that to me is a microcosm of all of reality and everything that we see that's happening in reality. So basically, there's the three things. Okay, you got the just awareness. But like you said, the nature of awareness, it has no choice but to be aware. And since there's nothing else to be aware of, that attraction is there. And then that's when you get the appearance of the of. So we go from one to just undifferentiated awareness to the attraction. And then the fruit would be what we call consciousness. And that's the of, which is just the appearance. But that's the fruit. And so that's everything that we're seeing. We're seeing all three things at once. We're seeing just the pure awareness, then the attraction, and then the fruit is consciousness. And you're right, consciousness is again just an illusion because it's where it is of something, but it's all three.
There you go. So the fruit of your three-step process of is, does, and as is an illusion. And that is a point where it becomes very dangerous. And maybe I'm not the proper opponent to speak with you about that. I would want to see you speak with a recognized Dzogchen master about exactly this point, because I'm afraid he may not, but he just might cut you to pieces regarding that, because he would probably say that this bending is already the beginning of ignorance.
Oh yeah, and I wouldn't disagree. Oh wait, I'm not disagreeing with that though.
So the Sargadatta would say the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's and I'm not intending to jump off into these points right now. I'm just saying that these 2 points are jumping off points for huge discussions, which I might not even be the proper partner in conversation.
Yeah.
I would be interested in you
definitely that last point.
Recognized Dzogchen masters with these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean,
they don't mess with these things. They are very strict about these points.
I get it.
So that's all I wanted to say for the moment.
All right, Kirk or William.
I'll speak just for 1 second. So, am I am I correct when you're saying you're going to talk about your stuff is going to be more like conversations that we've had?
No, on the triad.
Like, are you going to go through your triad and, are you going to move forward with quadrants and what other interesting things are there? Or are you going to just stay with 3, 2, 1?
Nope. The next
think about this too. Let me just say one other thing. The thing that I find fascinating about the story is that the human, so if I identify as a human, which I do, which also means I have a billion thoughts. And so what we're talking about conceptually all today, you're so far down from human to oneness is just, it's crazy. It's like, you either believe you're human in this world right now, and if you are, then that's great, because that means that one has multiplied not only one, the triad, but to exponential stuff to what we are right now. And so if you go the other way, you guys are talking about stepping back. I'm like, in scale, you can fucking fly back, but you can't be seen. It's kind of like a counter force. And so there's this whole thing, like in the community that we're in, that they're like in this like vortex that's just a different set of rules that humans are that can be perceived. So I want to know, Mark, because that's what I want to talk about. If anyone else wants to hear Mark and I talk about the other way, so we're not surrendering. So my point is, you have a choice, because we're a billion, so we have a choice. So I can either choice to surrender, and that means I'm done, man. I'm out. And I'm like, good. I hope what you learned was amazing. Or you can go, fuck, it's gonna call. Because you got to put energy in this whole thing, because we're made of energy beings. And so if energy isn't part of anything that is the concept of the mind, or however you want to take it, energy is what allows us to communicate right now in multiple levels. I mean, the bio talking all over the world using energy. And so you're like, oh, well, where is that? So that's the stuff that Mark, we could do a whole separate thing, because that's what I want to talk about, is the shit that he knows. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about it. So whether it's Western thought, it's like logical, you can't break any of the current human laws. So then that goes into scale, and it goes into space, and it goes into time, and it goes into thermodynamics, and it goes into all that stuff. Yeah, so I'm going to shut up, and that's it. That's my Kirk moment for today.
Let me just clarify something a little bit about Kirk. I started to mention Kirk earlier when I was talking about going from oneness to duality, to non-duality, to the trianistic model. And I thought that, I wonder if that the next model after me is going to be based on quadrants, because we seem to be go from 1 to 2 to 3. I'm thinking maybe the next thing is going to be quadrants. And that's where Kirk comes in. That's why Kirk is so ahead of all this, because he's into quadrants. He's something beyond me. He's something beyond my understanding, but we've had many talks, and I'm understanding it. And I'm seeing the relationships to it, but that's what Kirk is on. He's on the quadrants. It's the next level. That'll come after triune. But to answer your question, Kirk, the triune talk, the once a month, that would be the best case to bring that up. But also me and you could do a podcast just on that. But anyway, so there's two things. So one, yeah, thank you. So yeah, and to answer your question, like I said, I'll take the temperature of the room to see what you guys want, what you're more interested in, and how we're going to divvy it up. But William, what's your question, buddy? William.
Can you hear me this time,
Yes,
Mark?
sir, I can hear you perfect.
Okay, I'm having trouble here with the weak internet connection. No, I'm a complete novice.
I can hear you. I'm going to get some water, but keep talking.
Okay, well, as I said, I'm a complete novice here. I know very little about what you guys are discussing, but one question that I have been pondering and has me a little perplexed is that you talk about your experiences and your, I call it awakening or enlightenment, but yet you seem to have been present throughout all of your experiences as an experiencer. And what I'm trying to get my head around is that we hear talk of ego dissolvement and ego death and ego melting away. And, I'm wondering that if you as the self is experiencing the experiences, the phenomena that you've experienced, you were there throughout it all as the self. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, is that the same self that's sitting here talking with us now, and the same self that you were when you were 5 years old?
Oh, that's a good question. Wow. Oh man, I just thought about that the other day, being 5 years old. And yes, I mean, I don't know how I'm answering your question. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't really know how to answer it. But that last thing, yes, I definitely, well, yes and no. I thought about this recently. I was going back to my childhood memories when I was like 3 to 5 of actually like discovering my body and discovering like the interface, playing with choices and discovering my mind and how does choice work. So, so in one sense, I want to answer yes, because there's a, continual thing from here to there. But then when you look back at your experience of the experience, they're different. So yes, I definitely still feel that connection to that 3-year-old, to that 5-year-old who's trying to navigate the world and who's questioning things like free will and choice and trying to do things. So to answer your question.
Sorry for cutting across you, Mark, but what I'm specifically asking is the individual that I know as I, not the personality that I show the world, but the individual that I've been since I can, as far back as I can remember.
Yeah.
And if I prick my finger with a needle, the entity that I refer to as I feels that prick of a needle. Is that the same entity that has awareness of the experiences that you've had when you were in this, I'm reluctant to call it an altered state, but a more perceptive state than what we are usually in? Is that same individual entity that feels the stub of a toe or the prick of a needle, that's the entity that experienced that phenomenon?
I think the answer is yes. And I'll tell you this. This is the consistent from when I was 1 to now. This thing always stays the same. 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old.
Yeah.
But to better answer your question, I'm going to go back to my backboard for something that I didn't get to. So what I noticed the difference now between me now and a year ago and 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years, I'm 50 years old. So let's say all the way back, is the association with, it's not going to work. I'll just do it on this thing. All right. So this is what I've been obsessing with lately, trying to explain my wife, trying to demonstrate my experience. So when I'm trying to communicate my experience, I found myself drawing this thing. This is my experience. All there is a field, just a field, aware space. That's the reality. All the content that happens in there comes and goes, and that changes. So I could be a 2-year-old, I could be a 3-year-old, all the thing. But the thing that I identify with now, my experience is just the fucking field itself, the box. So the contents that come and go, whatever, but what I feel like is my experience is just that box. And now we'll take away the box without all the little dots inside, because that's really the most basic way to explain my experience. The way I experience myself is just a field. There's just a field, and that's imagination. That's mine. That's awareness. All there is the field, and what happens in that field are the feeling of a self, is the feeling of anger, is the feeling of identification, is the feeling of content, whatever fucking thing you could name, it's just an object that is inside of the field. And so what I'm talking about is the more you pay attention to, I erased the emptiness, but the more you pay attention to this stuff, the more you're going to become aware of the field itself instead of being drawn in by the contents in the field. Your attention becomes to just the general field, the basic space, by you paying attention to that. So the more I cultivate in that, the more now my experience is just the space. I feel like everything's just space. And that's where my attention is. That's where my magnet is. That's where my focus on. So space exists for everybody. Emptiness exists for everybody, but it comes more to the forefront. So to answer your question about the difference between me when I was 5 and the difference between me even a year ago is the more I'm starting to feel like the space as opposed to, any of the contents inside of it.
But just for clarity, the experiencer that you call the self, yourself, remains the same experiencer throughout.
No. These are all your words. No, you mentioned experiencer and self. I don't use any of those words.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to get the distinction, like the you, like the I that would feel pain if I stubbed my toe. In one of these enlightening experiences, that would be the same I that would be actually aware of
there's
the
just
experience.
pain. There's just pain. There's no I, there's just pain. You poke a needle, there's pain. You don't need an I, right? I mean, do you? Just pain, there's just pain. You've had experiences where you haven't had an I before. Haven't you ever had, as a matter of fact, it's usually painful experiences that take away the I, and there's just pain. I think, put it this way, afterwards, I think you could imagine an I, or you put it on there, but in the direct, you have to make I with your thinking. You have to deliberately generate and start creating thoughts and putting animation behind them to have this thought of I. It's a deliberate move you have to make. It's not going to happen on its own. It's there, the experience is there, but to call it an I and to think about it as an I, those are all extra steps that aren't there intrinsically. They're not there intrinsically. They're just more thoughts, more content. But I'm saying that's perfectly fine. It's just to notice your space. You're noticing your place, not space. Noticing your place is to be the space for these thoughts. So anyway, another thing I wanted to address, well, I think to get down to the essence of your question, this whole thing about egolessness and all that, the reason I wrote the books and talked about this is because I think people have a false perception that you're going to be egolessness, whatever that means, and you're not going to have any pain, you're not going to have any experiences, you're not going to have any of that. In my experience, getting back to who said that? Somebody said something, maybe it was Sandra. Yeah, Sandra pointed out something that was even deeper. There's something better than to going out through life and not having any pain, not having any suffering or anger, or anything like that. There's something much, so heaven or enlightenment would not be a version of going to the world where nothing bothers you anymore, nothing is there anymore. Instead, it's to go through the same life with the same thorns, the same conflict, the same of everything, and not feel like it should be different, not feel like it should be modified, not feel like there's something wrong with it, not to feel like anything is an error, that anything has to be changed. So nothing's any different. The ego, or whatever you want to call it, everything's there, everything's just appearances, but it's put into its proper context that you're the space for these things. And that is the liberation. That's the freedom. The freedom isn't living an indulgent life of pure goodness and nothing bad. The real power is not having any preferences for what happens. The real power is being able to exist and be the space for anything that comes up and have no difference to what comes up. And we could get into that, even the subtleties of not having any differences, but that's important, I think. And to be honest with you, I haven't heard concepts like egolessness and things like that in a long time, but the ego is it's an action, it's a dynamic. You could observe it. There's nothing wrong with it. You could witness it. It's an observable phenomena. I lost you. Did you leave?
No, I'm still here. I'm just taking in what you're saying. Yeah. And I'll admit I cannot get my head around the idea. Like, I'm still asking myself, if there was no experience or no self there when this phenomenon occurred, who then experienced it that's recalling it now and explaining it to us? Like, I cannot get that leap from there was nobody there, but yet something observed it and is bringing it back to relate to us. And I'm imagining from my perspective that entity that experienced it and is recalling it is the I that I am.
Yeah.
That will survive that.
And by the way, William, you're asking what I think is just the deepest and most profound question that still exists. The whole thing of, deeds are done, but there is no doer, that you just hit. I mean, the reason it's not just difficult for you, it's just difficult, period. But I want to speak to it. I don't want to just leave it there, because you said something that made me think I could add something to it or speak to it. Well, two things. One is, I don't even think I put up this talk yet, but I did a group talk on the shape. What I see is that what's underneath of all this, what's underneath of all the appearances, what's underneath the feeling of I, what's underneath of everything is just a basic shape. That's all there is. And so, okay, here you go, William. This is a way to think about how there's no person, that there's no thing there. So let's start at the very beginning. Underneath all reality, there's just this basic shape. There's no person there. There's no thing there. There's just this basic shape. And what I mean by this basic shape is, let's say awareness. So one thing that you're aware of, William, is just awareness. So awareness is just this basic shape. And so what I've been noticing, what I've really been drawn towards lately is, if you guys, I think I did do a talk, and I don't know if I posted it, but when I came back from the beach, I was really obsessed with the shape. And I determined that really all that exists underneath everything is just this shape, just this. And that creates the tension. For everything that we see, it's based on this very tension that we see here. And so how we got there from that is just this. So there's awareness, but because awareness is attracted to itself, you get that bend, and everything in there, so everything in life is going to spontaneously be attracted to the next thing by its past. So that made me realize what's more important than this even shape. You don't even need this whole shape. Really, I just realized all you really need, this is really just the shape of reality. I just realized there's just a straight curve. There's just a simple thing that funnels you into where we're at now. And so that manifests as evolution, to where your options get less and less until you're whittled down into this thing that we call enlightenment, or how we can't help what we do and we're just gravitated this way. But there's just a basic shape and we're being gravitated this way. So now to go back to your thing about there being a person or there being a something there. So let's start with what Rod and Gunnar were talking about, where at the very beginning, fundamentally before anything, before the mind, before the universe, before anything, there's just undifferentiated awareness. And that's the essence. So the essence is its awareness. The nature of it is to be aware. Because the nature of it is to be aware, it has nothing else but to be aware of to itself. And that's when you get the resultant, the bending or the bend. Because the path would be the bending and then the fruit would be the bend. Oh man, what was my point? The bending. Oh, so we can't help but to be gravitated towards we're going to, and that shape is what creates our, okay. So going back to your thing about how there's nothing there. So all there is awareness, there's no person yet, right? But awareness, here you go, I'll use this. So awareness bends in on itself. So there's pure differentiated awareness. So from that attraction to itself, you still just have awareness. But here's the differences, and this is what Gunnar was talking about. Now we go from pure undifferentiated awareness to what Rod was talking about, awareness of awareness. Now, and like I said, that would be a hallucination. That would be, you're taking it to be something else than what it is. So that's where we get the original ignorance, that we think that we're looking at something else, but it's actually just us. So, and none of these three things, there's actually a person. You have awareness, then you have the attraction, and then you have the result, which is awareness of awareness. And that's when you get the appearance of an I, the appearance of a black hole is what I call it. Like I look at our universe as a little black hole of individuality, but you're still just awareness. Okay, here's another analogy for you, William. Like the white light, when the white light bends and it appears red, it's still actually white light, right? You could see that.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing you saying is something that I can comprehend, if it's what you're saying, is that I am the awareness.
That's it.
At the base, I am the awareness.
Exactly.
And that everything else is just my focus.
Yeah, yeah. And to be honest with you, even the content, even the stuff that you're seeing is you too, but it's you looked at through the filter of the bending. I mean, everything that you could see, like I said, is a color of the rainbow, whether it's your thoughts, whether it's your mom, whether it's the weather, whether it's your ideas of politics, it's all out there. It's all content. So you are the awareness witnessing your content, and what your content is just the specifics of your conditions. So awareness could have different conditions and create Rod's experience, or awareness could create different conditions, have Blanche's experience, but it's all just awareness. So there's only one of us having all these experiences as we're having them in time. So But as I said, there's no one there. It's just awareness. So it's not like awareness is seeing something. There's just the thing. Like right now, there's just the talking. Right now, there's just the noise. Right now, there's just the sounds. You have to add. And then there's also the idea that there's someone listening to this. But that's just another idea thrown into the pile. So we have a pile. We got books. We got talks. We got all these things. And we have the feeling, the actual experience of individuality and being an I. And that is as valid as this. That's as valid as this. It's content. You could witness it. You could see it. You could experience it. So I'm not denying it. I'm just saying to put things in a perspective and look at your location so you could see what this thought of you is. It's here's something I said the other day. You're no more your thoughts than you are the things in your pocket. Like you don't feel identified to the things in your pocket. So why the hell should you feel identified with any of the things that you encompass? And by the way, you encompass your thoughts, you encompass your feelings, you encompass the sense of an I. You encompass the sense of an I, the very sense of an I that you have, which I don't deny, you encompass that. Does that help?
Yeah, I'm sort of getting what you're trying to relate to me, but it's going to take me time to absorb it.
And by the way, William, the number one foundation for me, like I said, there's 3 foundations of any practice. The first foundation of anything is brutal honesty with yourself. And that's what you're doing. You're asking yourself and saying, I'm not seeing this. I hear what you're saying. I'm not seeing it. That's the practice. That's it. Explain what you see. Tell what you see. That's your reality. You're in it. This is the practice. You're being brutally honest and you're committed to it. So just keep on and keep listening and keep looking. There's no magic answer. The magic answer is this. I erased it, but the magic answer is the black part. Just focus on whatever. Oh, another thing I want to say too that I didn't mention, we're going way over. There's no rules, but is the address. Another thing that I talk to my wife about a lot is an address, because I was having a conversation with her and she was being brutally honest, just like you. She was like, you know what? I don't know if I have the address. And by the way, what I mean address, it's what I mean by your homing signal, your magnet, the thing that you always come back to. You could call it the mind, you could call it stillness, you could call it silence, you could call it the bottom, whatever it is, your address, that thing that you know is you, the deepest part of yourself that continues, that's the part that I call your address. And so she said, oh my gosh, you know what? I don't even know if I have an address. So I backed up, I was like, okay, well, let's compare it to everything else. You do know something that is more silent than anything else. You do know something that is more still than anything else. That's your address. However deep it is, it doesn't matter. Start there with the emptiness, with the stillness, and just cultivate it. The more attention you put towards that, which is all meditation is, contemplation is, the more that will grow and you're going to see it in the world. So keep it up, William.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Judy, and then Boris, and then Nubin again.
I wanted to say something about what William was grappling with, that we're talking about heading in a particular direction here, but my thought while William was talking is that the more he practices, or anybody, or the more I practiced, what I found is that the I part receded. And so that you say address, the address became less magnetic. Mm-hmm. And so thoughts were not as, the experience did not come home as fast. And then eventually experience didn't have to go anywhere because the awareness had come forward to meet where the experience was happening. And then the direction of things shifted. Mm-hmm. So that was that part. But the thing that I really wanted to ask goes back to what we were talking about before 1 o'clock, actually. You said that, you know, you were all keyed up about the triune thing. What I want to know is, did you have that experience of being as your daughter before the triune thing occurred to you?
No, I was obsessed with the triune, using it as a tool to solve the mystery, and it solved the mystery through my daughter, through the experience. So I was contemplating Dzogchen, contemplating the whole thing. All Dzogchen is contemplation, just constantly, you know, contemplating, bringing the mind back home. Like, I don't know, somebody said, just awareness. The only thing you can practice awareness is to be aware, to be mindful. So where are you placing your attention? Place it where you are, place it here. Don't, but anyway, I forgot your question. What was your question?
Before or after triune?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So I was contemplating the triune, and that was the answer. That was the reality's answer. By the way, Guna, you asked a question. I dedicated my book to the substratum. The substratum is just the word I use to whatever is underlying all of this. And I felt like it was teaching me. I felt like my whole life, the substratum has been teaching me, showing me through meditations and contemplations and experiences. And so when I was contemplating that day with my daughter, I contemplated, and that was the answer provided to me. It gave me an answer through her, which, by the way, I reflected on this the other day. I don't know if I mentioned this. I've never thought about that experience or the experience where I saw behind me forever. Like there was some weird block where I could never think about these experiences, but for whatever reason, I was thinking about them with me on the walk with my wife, and I realized something. The part of enlightenment that it was the big part, the part that was actually I don't want to say relevant, important, but the part that rose to the top, the most relevant part. It happened in 3 experiences. First, I'm sitting there and I'm looking out at the mountains, just me and my daughter. I'm looking at her, me and my daughter, there's the mountains, me, daughter, mountains. Next experience, I'm gone. Instead, I'm presence behind my daughter's eyes. But like I said, it's vacuous. I don't remember thinking, maybe she's quiet, who knows, but I'm just like seeing from her perception. And then the next perspective was I backed up even further, and I was the eyes behind every fucking eye in the universe, where you're just seeing like my book cover. But none of that was it. The real thing was when I came right back to normal and I'm looking at the mountains again, everything's the same, but the difference is that picture that I drew in there, to where now when I was looking at the mountains, I saw that I was the Buddha encompassing the mountains. The mountains were my arms, the trees were my legs, my daughter was my body, everything that I could see was me. So it started out with me, my daughter, the mountains, and then when it came back, that Buddha picture where it's showing the Buddha with the world inside of it, what I was trying to capture in that picture was the feeling of encompassment. That was the difference. When I came back, you know, screw the fact seeing behind my daughter's eyes or seeing behind your eyes or your eyes. None of that was relevant. The thing was when I returned back to normal, my perception has never been the same to where now I'm encompassing that which I see. My relationship to the world is the same. And that's why I'm saying after that, who cares about thoughts? Who cares about feelings? Who cares about identification? Because I have the orientation right that these are things appearing in me, spontaneously arising. And who am I to say what should come or go? I got no control over it. And I have it in me that I'm accepting and trusting. So whatever it needs to do its thing. But wow, I don't remember whose question did I just answer? Was that relevant to anybody? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Judy. It was Judy.
Judy, yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes, and I think that the evolution here has to do with the same kinds of things, but totally out of order. That Buddha thing happened so many years before the
awakening.
No, before moving out of.
Before you had a context for it?
Well, no. So what we're talking about essentially is this idea of you could suddenly find yourself looking out of somebody else's eyes.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So that there was a big long, like the Buddha thing happened when I was a young teenager, and the change into looking through somebody else's eyes happened, or the hedges, has happened one day. That happened when I was in my late 20s, and it was in my mid 30s that aware space happened.
And you know, I'm glad you mentioned that, Judy, because not just that, but since I've been talking to people, I've talked to a lot of people that have had experiences beyond my realm, beyond my scope of experience. So I don't think any of these things have any linear, as a matter of fact, I know they don't, because I'm starting to think the reason I went through such a horrible purification thing that I had to go through in my second book was because I went through this so haphazardly. I didn't have a tradition. I didn't go into this in a conservative. I went into this like a reckless, person, like, let me at them. And therefore I had to deal with a lot of hell afterwards. But I guess to answer your question is no, I think, like you said, there is no proper order. And that's what we're learning. That's what these conversations are teaching us. There isn't each of us are just a different configuration of how it's bent. So each of our, and think about it, even in the classic text, even if you just want to look at the classic enlightened people, none of them are the same. Nisargadatta Maharaj versus Ramana versus a Zen, you know, they're all unique. So why should we be any different? All right, Boris, you're up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can, Boris. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, my comment was about the maybe the confusion that arises about experience and the experiencer, and the sort of imputation of a self based on something happening. And I think part of it is maybe the problem with, you know, the construction of the language itself.
Yes, thank you. That's why I say to people, look, I'm not a grammar person. I'm not a language person. I'm not going to be holding to words that make it sound like I'm something. But go ahead, Boris. Thank you. You're right. Grammar is exactly it.
Well, it's like, you know, to form a sentence, you would say
a subject and an object, right?
Subject, object, and a verb. And so, you know, we presume that because that's how we describe experience, that those words point to actual things. So there's an actual experience, there's an actual experiencer, and there's an actual experience, right?
You're absolutely
so I think what Mark is describing, and you know what is available in various teachings, is that there can be painting, or feeling of pain, or smelling, or thinking. And those don't automatically impute someone to whom it's happening. So in a way, it's like kind of reversing the order, so to speak. So we think there's a someone, and that someone can experience these things. Mm-hmm. A different way to look at it is to start with, let's say, the verb, right? Like the thinking or the painting, and that the thing to whom it seems to happen, like Mark was saying, gets added afterward. It's actually a product of the experience, yes, or the happening.
It's right? Another thought. It's just an additional thought. It's one more thought, right, stacked up. That's it.
Right. So there can be sensation, there can be thoughts, there can be emotions, but they don't have to belong to anything, right?
It's happening right now.
Right. Right. So you know what most of these teachings point to is that that it's imagined that it belongs to somebody, yeah, right? And so it's possible, like if you wanted to look at it through language, I think, you know, I was trying to figure out, well, how would you explain this? You know, like where we're usually say this happened to this person or whatever, or to this thing. You could start with just looking at painting or smelling, right? And you could say, well, smelling, so we could have Mark smelling, or Judy smelling, or Kirk smelling, right? But there's the smelling. So you could say like the smelling is universal, and then the assignment of the smelling to the person is what's, you could say, subjective or situational. So you could just start with the experience or the sensation or whatever, and look at it that way and see that, well, you could assign it to anybody. Anybody could be, quote unquote, having the painting or the smelling or the thinking, right? So that might be helpful to just in terms of like a language or how to think about it, that possibility. And it's something I would say you have to imagine until the experience of it kind of lays it bare and exposes why it's that way. But I think even the imagining of it can help to sort of loosen the tether to this idea that it belongs to somebody.
Well, that's why in Zen they say no bell, just the ringing.
Oh,
have you heard that phrase before? You know, no bell, just the ringing.
No, that's exactly it. That's exactly what Boris was saying. That's exactly it. I appreciate that. Thank you, Boris. And I hope you heard that, William, because that's exactly it. Because that is our experience now too. I mean, if you look, there's just the sounds happening. There's just the sensation of what's in your body. And here's another thing too that's new to me too. This is embarrassing because, like I said, when I read these books, these Buddhist books, I don't follow the rules. I don't really try to memorize things. But they said something when I'm rereading them. so somebody, maybe it was Rod, was discussing all the different, what the Buddhists call skandhas. So all there is there's a hearing reality, just sound. There's a sound reality. Then another one is just a sight reality. Then another one is just a sensation of touch reality. So we have all these different skandhas. But what the cool part was that they threw in there too is that the mind is also just another skandha. So this experience that you're seeing that you call yourself, just picture 6 balls rotating real fast, so fast that they make like a cigarette, like a loop or an imaginary loop. So that imaginary loop that you can make from a cigarette, it looks to be a real solid ring. So you're like, look, there's a real solid ring. But that real solid ring that you take to be a real solid ring is actually 6 things swirling around so fast that they appear to be a real solid ring. And one of those 6 things is you got sight, sound, feel, and all the thing. But another one is just the mind. So your mind and all the content, and whether it's angry mind or thinking mind, it's just like sight, it's just like sound, it's just another one of the skandhas. So it's a really helpful way to see that, William. What I think Boris and Rod were just pointing to was that we have all these different perceptions right now: hearing, sound, shape. You have all these things, but they're swirling at once. They give you a sense of a continuum, like if you were to swirl a cigarette and you get the illusion of a solid ring, but they're the 6 skandhas. And the important part of that is the mind is one of the skandhas. That's awesome. That just shows you all your identifying, all your anger, whatever you want to think about, it's just another skandha. It's no more important than the smell or the taste or the colors. It's no more significant. I find that powerful. So thank you, Boris, for clearing that up. Nubin, what's up?
I was just going to add to what William was talking about. It seemed like I was like, of course, like on this broad spectrum of things, I would say I've just had a glimpse or the first crack till now. And I would say like all my efforts were in vain, because like paradoxically those efforts were important, but when I got a realization, I wasn't really trying to realize anything. I was just going about my regular life, and certain things happened which led me to kind of like an emotionally turbulent experience where I was clearly not thinking about awakening or enlightenment. That was the least of my concerns, but that is when it happened.
Wow, that's awesome. I really appreciate that, Nubin. Thank you. I really appreciate. Hey, and by the way, thank you all the guys. I'm so jazzed about this, but I want to get into the practical part because I see people dropping out, and I want to ask this why people are here. By a show of hands, is there anybody, or you could actually, hey, do me a favor, Nubin, take down your waving hand so I could ask you guys to do something. Because not everybody's on camera, so I don't want to ask you to wave because you're not on camera. So by clicking that little wave button, tell me if anybody does have a preference for one or the other. And I'm not going to ask which, but if you do have a preference to listen to either a Dzogchen talk or me going over my books. So with a wave of hand, is there anybody that does have a preference and they're only interested in one or the other, either, no matter what it is? So just Judy. And which one is that, Judy? Now that I said I won't ask, what is it?
I prefer this dialogue about current being. Current being. Not the, okay, like we're doing now, not the
reading.
Notion.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, okay. Then maybe what I'll do, because actually this was my original idea. I never wanted to do the Dzogchen readings in public. I meant to just read them to myself. So why don't we do this? Why don't we have the, and also, would you guys be interested in bi-weekly or just once a month? I don't want to, I figure if we do it too much, it's not going to, I don't want it to be like a church, you know what I mean? Like a weird thing you got to go to every other week. So what's better for everybody, monthly or bi-weekly? What would you be more likely to attend? Bi-weekly or monthly?
Me,
Anybody?
monthly.
Monthly? Blanche?
That's just me. I'm not suggesting.
No. How about you, Rod?
Well, my original hit would be do bi-monthly, and then that way everyone can show up at least once a month.
That's true. All right, so why don't I do that? So we'll do that, and actually we'll get to my triune thing because that's what that's the other thing I was going to do. So the next thing I was going to do on my stuff is the triune books because I'm really excited to talk about that. And now that I know that other people are too, then that's fun. We can get into it, which we really need to because I saw how complicated that was when I started to read it from that book. I could just feel like, oh my God, this is, you know, we might as well be discussing molecules and physics. But so why don't I do this? Why don't we just have that talk bi-weekly on the triune? And then once we get that, another thing I want to do is I want to go back and redo all my books, because I realize I barely covered anything. There's so much more I could add to it. And then maybe the Dzogchen thing I'll just do by myself, which will be easier because then I don't have to organize a time. But if it turns out some people really want to do Q&A, then I could set up a time for people could be there. But why don't bi-monthly I set up a time for us to talk about my book, the triune, and then whatever things come up naturally. And like this, the format will be question and answer. I definitely get more from you guys. So the format will definitely be me reading a very little bit and then opening up with the questions. And then if the questions dissolve, I'll go back to more, and we'll just do that until, you know, we all get bored. So that will be that. And then the Dzogchen thing, I'll just plan on doing myself, just slowly reading it and explaining it. And people, if you're interested, you can just look at it as a podcast. But who knows if, you know, other people do want to participate, you know, the whole thing is just setting up a time. The third thing I want to talk about is the time. I know this was very difficult because we have a 15-hour gap from California to Beijing. So was this time, I mean, let's just assume it was good for everybody. So now I ask, was this time not good for anybody? And you just did it once, you know, to see how it was, but if in the future, it's not good for you? Awesome. Okay, so we'll just keep it at this time. So does that sound good for people? Sunday at 1 o'clock or whatever time this was? Sundays? Awesome. Okay, that's the only thing I wanted to cover for me. I want to make sure when I leave here, I got a good feel for it. So I think what I'm going to leave with is twice a month, talk about this or whatever comes up. And by the way, if you guys have things you want to bring up, anything that I talk about, bring it up, you know. But I do want to start with the triune because no one's ever talked about it. So why not start with you guys? So twice a month, 1 o'clock, Sundays, and that's it. Okay, so that now that we got that out of the way, I appreciate that, and thanks for standing by. I'll end this, but I'll let Guna say something or ask something.
Well, first of all, my name is Guna.
Guna, I'm getting better. Hey, listen.
Yeah, but the Americans cannot pronounce a short U. I recognize that. So you're going to say Guna or whatever. It's Guna. In fact, the Scandinavians would criticize me. They would call it Gunnar, but I'm not Swedish. So anyway, but that's not what I wanted to say. I wanted to say that the one rule you might want to follow is to separate group discussion from reading a text. Not necessarily across broadcasts, but at least within the same broadcast, that you have a time when you say, okay, now it's open for discussion or something. Not that it would bother me, but this way you will never get through your project of reading through a text. That's the main suggestion I want to make. So you have to, if you want to follow my thought, then you would have to structure your meetings in a way that excludes group participation until a certain time within the podcast.
And I like that. No, I appreciate that. That's actually advice that I will take because I want everyone to benefit from it. So absolutely, Guna, thank you. I will definitely do that. Absolutely. Okay. All right, guys. Well, hey, I just want to take the rest of the time to say thank you. I appreciate that. We got diverted at the last second, so I know I lost a lot of people that couldn't come. But what I want to do, the reason I'm doing this is because that POK group was a really large group, and I'd rather just have a small focus group of people that want to be here, because I was a guest. I don't know if anybody knows that, but I never knew about the POK group, but I was invited, and so I talked, and it turned out to just be so great that I just kept going back and loving it. But because it's a closed group, I couldn't invite anybody. So none of my actual readers could actually go to the group. So this is the first time where I'm having a group where I'm personally inviting people, because I believe we're interested in the same thing. We share the same magnet. We share the same, we got our beacon is set to the same course. So I just want to say, each individual one of you, I've been so excited about this for this time. Leading up to it. So thank you, everybody. So you are very special to me. Just thanks for being here, and thanks for making this better. And I look forward to doing it. So we'll do it bi-weekly as a group. And then if I want to read some stuff on Zen and Dzogchen, I could throw that in there. But I'm glad the way this went down, because I think now we got definitely something, a good structure we could look forward to. So I'll go ahead and end it here. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. So thank you, Kirk, Judy, Blanche, Rod, Anne-Marie, Susan, Gunna, Boris, Holly, Nubin, and Minette, and all the other people that were here. And I'm going to record this and put it on YouTube. So you're all going to be famous. All right. Bye, guys. I love you. Thank you. Bye. Have a good day. Have a good Sunday.